These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code THOM. The Clean Phone Pro phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. X-Chair, changing the world one seat at a time. More information at xchairtom.com. Bloomsy Box, simply better blooms. More info available at bloomsybox.com, code THOM. And Boll & Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bollandbranch.com, code THOM.
Our book today, the Thom Hartmann Book Club, is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms, in our fields, our streets, and our sewers, our bodies, and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until, at last, we realize it has been our own mouth screaming, and we are lost. A child born today inherits, in that secret, a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about that corporate health finance. They're different. Healthcare is anything that helps you stay safe. For a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us, or could ever keep us, from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different, inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer health care, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide health care to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest health care program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of healthcare. I believe this healthcare is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are healthcare. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer healthcare is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single-payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Kolick. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people, and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met in my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves. He's doing pretty good, all things considered. He beat his original life expectancy of 18, and now probably has a long life ahead of him. Steve
And
needs a
greetings, my
wheelchair to
friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Just to give you a quick recap of our day, our first hour, just you and me together here, we can, I want to dig into neo-Calvinism and the Republican Party, not to throw a $5 word at you, but, and also this new ideology of the Trump administration. We want to get them all infected, as many people as possible. It's a good thing. I'll be giving you some details on that, and we can talk about that. In our second hour, Dr. Edwin May is going to be with us. He led a research project for decades for the federal government to spy on foreign governments using ESP. And I realize this sounds like fringe stuff, but this is like, well, you're just going to be amazed. And in our third hour, Professor Richard Wolff, the economist and author, is going to be with us for the entire hour to talk about why hasn't America collapsed yet? What's going on? How does the economy work? Why, you know, we just have a million questions. We're going to be doing deep dives in the second and third hour. But in our first hour, I want to start out with John Thune, the Republican from South Dakota, the senator. Came out yesterday afternoon and you know, in opposition apparently to giving Americans a one-time $600 check, saying, well, some people are already getting unemployment benefits, which are, by the way, going to run out in another 2 weeks. Some people are already getting unemployment benefits, so they would be double dipping. They would be getting an added benefit. We can't have that. And people wonder, where the hell does this come from? You know, is it just that they really hate working people and they really think that the billionaires who fund them and the big corporations that pay for their campaigns are the only real humans on earth? Well, no, it's not that. And, you know, I've talked about this before on the program, but I think it bears restating. John Calvin back in the day, and we're talking back in the 16th century, right? Or maybe the early 17th century. John Calvin, a religious leader in Europe, Scotland as I recall, was struggling with the question, and frankly, you know, the modern Calvinist church is not quite as crazy as all this, but neo-Calvinism still survives. They were struggling with the question, if it's true what the Bible says, that we're all, you know, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We are all born out of a woman's womb and therefore are covered with original sin. That's, you know, right there in the Bible, right? Then if we're all sinners and we're all terrible people at heart, if Thomas Hobbes was right, then how do we identify who the good people are who should be running our government? Because somebody has to be in charge. And the Calvinistic perspective is, well, you identify the good people by knowing who God blessed. And then, of course, the question is, well, how do you know who God gave blessings to? And their answer is, look at the rich people. Obviously, God made them rich. And so, therefore, the rich people should run the world. The first chapter of Russell Kirk's 1951-52 book, The Conservative Mind, the book that lit Barry Goldwater and William F. Buckley on fire and started the modern conservative movement, the book that to this day is quoted by Republicans. The first chapter is all about Edmund Burke, the British conservative during the American Revolutionary era. Thomas Paine spent 2 weeks at Burke's house on his way to France to get arrested in the French Revolution, and got so pissed off at Burke, they had such huge arguments during those 2 weeks, that Thomas Paine wrote an entire book rebutting Burke. It's called The Rights of Man. It's still in print. But Burke was the guy who famously said, you know, it does me no harm if a man is allowed to engage in a profession as servile as making candles or cutting hair, but if such a man is allowed to vote or participate in government, it does society considerable violence. I'm paraphrasing, but you can find the quote. It's all over the place. That is what's going on. These Republicans, like John Thune, these other Republicans, they all believe that, you know, if you really want to make sure that good people are in charge, smart people are in charge, people who understand how things work, it's got to be the rich people. And the more power that's acquired by working class people, as happened during the period from the 1930s until the 1980s, when we had the fastest growing, strongest middle class in the history of the world, much less American history, a middle class that was actually growing faster than the rich between 1940 and 1980. The conservatives looked at that and said, wait a minute, that middle class is getting way too much power. Reagan pointed it out. Women are burning bras. Kids are refusing to go to war. They're taking drugs. They're having sex. Oh my God. They've got too much money. They've got too much leisure time. They can go to college for free. That's crazy. This was the Reagan argument that conservatives picked up. So why is anybody shocked when Mitch McConnell and John Thune and Marco Rubio and all the rest of them, Rick Scott, are all sitting around going, we shouldn't be giving this money to working people. It just gives them more political power. It just we don't want that to happen. We have to drive a stake through the heart of this neo-Calvinist, neo-conservative Republican Party. It's time to just say that's it. And here's another dimension of it. While the rich people are living in their private bubbles, when was the last time you heard about a billionaire getting COVID? Oh, you haven't? Neither have I. I wonder why. Well, because they live in, their gated mansions and their gated communities or on their private islands like Ivanka and Jared just bought down off the coast of Florida. And the servants that they have live in, and so they aren't exposed to COVID. And, it's like royalty. But the rest of us? Well, it turns out that the Trump administration wanted the rest of us infected. Honest to God, the Trump administration wanted as many Americans as possible infected. A lot of people scratched their heads last week when Donald Trump, in a, it wasn't a press conference, but in one of his conversations with the press, somebody said, well, you've got 15 million Americans who are infected now. And Trump was like, wow, we're getting close to 15% of the population. Well, 15 million Americans is actually 1/3 of 15% of the population. It's about 4% of the population. But nonetheless, Trump was like, good, we're getting there. See, they had this theory that if everybody got infected, or if a lot of people got infected, we would have herd immunity. And therefore, everything would be good. It literally has never worked before with any disease. It didn't work with polio, it didn't work with measles, it didn't work with, you could argue that it worked with chickenpox, sort of, but, it's not that deadly a disease, frankly. And it wasn't until the mid-1950s that we even had a vaccine. But it has really never worked with any kind of serious disease that kills a lot of people, and that's why we have 300,000 dead Americans. And on the other side of the break, I'm going to tell you what has happened to I think we're up to 17 million Americans infected now. What is happening to a sizable percentage of those 17 million Americans, many of whom are going to need health care for the rest of their lives, for ongoing disabilities that the Republican Party doesn't want you to have. In fact, between 10 and 20 million Americans have lost their health insurance in the last year because they lost their jobs with COVID, because of the COVID epidemic. And then you've got these people who are, like the guy who was in charge of security at the White House. I think his last name was Bailey. He was 3 months in the hospital. He had his right foot and lower leg amputated and his left toe amputated. And now he's facing massive hospital bills. And yes, he had full hospitalization, the best the federal government offers. And he's still facing massive hospital bills. Not to mention the fact that he's got to retrofit his house and his car and everything else because now he's permanently disabled. So I'm gonna give you the details of what long-term COVID actually is, what COVID actually does to people who don't die. Amazing study that was just published over on Vox.com. I'll share that with you after the break. But here we have this guy from the Trump administration saying it would be best if we opened up and flooded the zone with COVID.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Which is why Trump's been doing maskless rallies and why Mike Pompeo tried to have maskless Christmas parties. I mean, this is truly breathtaking. I don't know how to describe it beyond just truly friggin' breathtaking. Randy in Ottawa, Iowa. Hey, Randy, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, sir. I just wanted to share with you, all this turmoil and stuff is all over the Facebook page and stuff, and you're talking about this Calvinist idea about a chosen group of people to lead our nation, or to drive us into the great big S-hole. The point is that we all share the same future, and it does not matter if you're rich or poor, white, black, and that is, physics say that in time the sun will grow large, and eventually we could be the first rock from the sun, and the sun will die. And when the sun dies, everybody goes into the black hole. And it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or what color you are, everybody's going to the same place in the end. 5 to 15 billion
years down the road, yeah.
Yes, sir. So the thing of it is that I believe in human salvation and trying to save the soul of America. And there's a lot of union people like myself who are drawing union pensions, who are anti-government. They are anti-Biden. They are, they're just, it's like they don't care about their pensions. They don't care who brought them the 40-hour work week. They don't care about how much is at stake if we lose, and they all drag me down into their quagmire, the great America. So I love you, Tom, and your show's great, and
Thank you.
a bright light in my life.
Yeah, I think your analysis is spot on. Thank you very much. Ann in Santa Fe, you think I'm wrong about something?
My interpretation of the biblical message is extremely narrow, and the Calvinist interpretation that you just used, biblical, I would point your listener to Richard Horst, retired professor in Massachusetts. Basically, he makes.
And I don't know what's going on with your phone, but maybe you're getting a call, waiting call coming in or something. But every other one of your words is vanishing.
I'm getting. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Say it again.
Okay. So basically, he and Jorg Rieger at Vanderbilt and John Dominic Crossan, that's not the message, Tom, that Martin Luther King and Desmond Tutu followed from the biblical message.
No, of course not. I'm not characterizing it as such. I'm saying that this is neo-Calvinism. This was the message that John Calvin. It wasn't actually even John Calvin's main message, but it was adopted in England for over 200 years as the main message to justify the royal family.
But the way that you presented it, I would submit, is that the Bible says the following, and the Bible says many things. There are many voices, and there are also voices that make the case that the dominant biblical message is economic justice and human rights. It's right there from when God freed the slaves from the.
I agree. From the Jubilee to the New Testament, I agree with you, Ann. I'm not sure. I'm still baffled by your criticism. I was actually quoting Paul, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And of course, Genesis. Anyhow, we'll be right back. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, we have a new video up for the supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com. I really enjoy doing these separate from what we're doing on the air because sometimes I can say things that would be impolitic or inappropriate to say on the air. Like the name of the website that I'm talking about in this video, and I lay it out and share it with you on the video. It's ratbleepingthecourts.com, and the bleeping, of course, is a word that you just can't say on the air that starts with F. And this website is just outing these judges that Donald Trump and the Federalist Society have been sending through Mitch McConnell's Senate like a friggin' assembly line, and how unqualified they are, how hateful they are, how aggressively they've worked to screw students, to deny. Well, one of them actually said that women who are on birth control pills, that should be reason to fire people. Right? I mean, it's just insane. You can check it out over at ThomHartmann.com. Okay, this is Lois Parsley has done just a really great deep dive research into the effects of COVID on people who don't die from it. Everything we're hearing, or most of what we're hearing in the media, is people who die of COVID, and yes, that's an outrage. You know, we've lost more people to COVID than we lost in World War II. I mean, it's like we have exceeded any measurement of an insane national emergency. We have 1 out of 5 COVID deaths on Earth is right here in the United States, and yet we are 4% of the world's population, which I think is what, 1 out of 20, or thereabouts. It's mind-boggling. And it turns out that it's the result of an intentional policy to spread COVID as far and wide as possible. Kristi Noem really did her part in South Dakota by having the Sturgis motorcycle rally, where 500,000 people came to South Dakota and then traveled all over the country, and boom, you've got mass infections all over the country. This was all a Republican plan. So let's look at the long-term effects. This is Lois Parsley's piece you can find over at Vox.com. It's titled Long-Term COVID-19 Effects, the Many Strange Symptoms Explained. She starts out with a story of Heather Elizabeth Brown. She was in her 30s. She was active, healthy. She said, but they had to coach me how to breathe after having COVID. 6 months later, Brown is still very ill. She's been hospitalized for blood clots and has lingering health. This is 6 months later. Has lingering heart problems, nerve pain, and extreme fatigue. Even making breakfast is now out of the question, she says. And she's also experiencing severe brain fog, so she can't work. Almost a year into the pandemic, writes Lois Parsley, there have not yet been thorough, long-scale studies to determine the true prevalence of long COVID, but preliminary research suggests that somewhere between 10 and 88% of COVID-19 patients will experience at least one symptom for months. Some of these can be life-altering. One study found that 50% of non-ICU patients reported a significant change in their cognitive functioning. In other words, how they think. Anthony Fauci, quote, "This is a phenomena that is really quite real and quite extensive," end quote. The sheer volume of people getting sick means there are already millions of Americans who have and will soon have long COVID. Now, what are some of these differences? Number one, both men and women have reported sexual and reproductive symptoms following COVID infection. This was a survey of 640 long-term COVID patients, reported more than 200 total symptoms, including testicular pain, urinary problems, and menstrual changes. COVID-like symptoms, quote, brain fog, fatigue, dizziness, joint pain. All of that is happening. They're saying these are the symptoms of menopause, but people are getting them in their 20s and 30s. Long COVID can also significantly impact male reproductive systems and testosterone levels. During acute illness, the testicles are attacked by the virus directly because they are one of the highest sites of ACE2 expression. This condition, quote, frequently presents in men with erectile dysfunction. They also found autoimmune orchitis, which is an inflammation of the testicles, which leaves you infertile afterwards. You can no longer have babies. It affects the arteries in the penis, making erections difficult or impossible. Erectile dysfunction is highly prevalent, particularly when you look at the groups who have had COVID from the study. By the way, something that you should tell all those guys with their guns running around without masks. One study found 81% of ventilated patients developed delirium. 1 in 5 patients experienced long-term cognitive impairment. 1 out of 5, they're long-term cognitively impaired. New research suggests that around half of asymptomatic, that is people who have no symptoms, can have damage, permanent damage to their lungs. Large blood clots cause tissue damage requiring amputation. Smaller clots can restrict blood flow in the lungs, impairing normal oxygen exchange. This is among people who are not hospitalized. If clots travel to the heart or brain, they can also cause strokes or heart attacks. As 23-year-old Riley Behrens recently suffered after corona infection. Before this, she said, "I was a healthy young athlete with no major medical conditions." A study published in the Annals of Vascular Surgery found a 2-fold increase during the pandemic in major amputations and a spike in the number of stroke patients. In half of 172 hospitalized coronavirus patients, the scientists found autoantibodies. These are when these are injected into lab mice, the animals develop blood clots. COVID-19 patients, half of 1,216 COVID-19 patients, again, not hospitalized, in one study also had heart abnormalities, and 1 in 7 had severe cardiac issues. People can present without any lung symptoms, just have heart and brain involvement, says Eric Topol, a professor at Scripps Institution. It continues. I'll share a little bit more after the break. We'll pick up your phone
You're listening
calls.
to the
Stick around.
Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
This is one serious, nasty, evil disease that you do not want to get, even if you are young and not afraid of dying. Today and tomorrow are your last chances to get that really good feeling knowing that you have become part of the solution instead of the problem, or instead of just standing on the sidelines. Last chance to pitch in to help Free Speech TV. We are behind. We need your help. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. If you value this network, if you value the programming on this network, my show and all the others, call now. Call now and let them know that you're listening. Let them know that you're watching. Let them know that you care about Free Speech TV. You want to support Free Speech TV. You want to keep this network going. And most important, make a monthly sustaining contribution. These are the most important contributions you can make to Free Speech TV because they provide them with the ability to budget. They know what's coming in. And right now they represent just a little tiny slice of their pledge drive income. And I want to get that up to the point where instead of the one-time gifts being their principal source, it's, they've got this foundation, and then the one-time gifts become like the icing on the cake sort of thing, And so, yes, please, by all means, give a one-time gift and get one of the premiums that they have. But then also tell them, yeah, I want that book, I want that book on oligarchy. That's going to be a really good book. And so, I'll give you $120 right now. But by the way, would you take $10 a month off my credit card, until I tell you to stop, or for the next year or whatever? That way, and that makes you a sustaining member. You get the really cool refrigerator magnet calendar. It's a calendar for your refrigerator that's held on magnetic. You get that. But it also means that you're helping Free Speech TV with their budgeting and with their planning going forward. You're basically becoming a day-to-day part of Free Speech TV rather than just an occasional supporter. It's really important. It's really, really useful and helpful and important. There are a whole bunch of premiums for those one-time gifts that I was just talking about. With a $20 gift, you get the Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the Free Speech TV Fight for Democracy sticker. With a $50 gift, there is the Change Never Happens from the Top Down tote bag. Really nice, good, well-made canvas tote bag. Or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, you have your choice of the Free Speech TV black hat or the Thom Hartmann Program mug. This is something that no other program can offer you. So the Thom Hartmann Program mug. I think it's a really cool thing. That's with $75. With a $100 gift, you have your choice of 2 Free Speech TV face masks or the 2010 quarantine Free Speech TV tumbler. You know, the kind of I survived 2020, excuse me, if I said 2010 before, you know what I meant. With a $120 gift, too many 20s and 1s here. With a $120 gift, there's the Ask Me About Free Speech TV t-shirt, or the social distancing kit, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the Free Speech TV hand sanitizer, or my book, The Hidden History of Monopolies, which talks about the $5,000 tax that we all pay every year because our economy over the last 40 years, since Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Act back in 1982, our economy has come to be dominated by giant corporations that are just squeezing us dry. And where is all that money going? It's popping into the pockets of the billionaires who are, the ones who own those corporations. So that's The Hidden History of Monopolies, or the new book. And I've been saying it's going to come out in the spring. I just had that in my head, but Louise was telling me yesterday, this book is going to actually be out in late January, early February. So you may get it sooner than I thought. And it's The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, and it's tracing the rise of the hard right in the United States and the history of the United States. We actually have an oligarchic history, and it's fascinating and a little chilling. And so, be well armed for those debates and arguments and know what's going on. So those are all $120 gifts. With a $240 gift, you can join us for a Free Speech TV meet and greet online. We do a Zoom call, get a dozen people together and just hang out for an hour and talk about whatever's on your mind. And I'll answer any questions I can. And sometimes I ask questions, and we'll have a good time. You can come in you can have a camera on, or you can have your camera off. It's fine. Some people just don't want to show their faces. That's good. Or you can get both the Oligarchy and the Monopoly book, the Thom Hartmann Democracy book set. That's with a $240 gift. With a $360 gift, there's The Hidden History of Oligarchy, The Hidden History of Monopolies, a set of 2 face masks, and the Quarantine 2020 tumbler, making the $360 gift a real deal. And with a $1,000 gift, get in line. You can come to Portland and hang out with us when all this craziness of COVID is over. So a lot of options there, a lot of different possible choices. But the bottom line is, I've been talking a lot about, I want to hit our goal by the end of the week so that Andrew from San Diego's $10,000 gets kicked in. I also want to hit our goal because I want to keep this network going. I don't want them to have to lay off people or tighten their belt. I want them to grow. I want them to be stronger. And you do too, I'm sure. So please call now, 877-37. On this week's Science Revolution, Vien Trong with Tom Steyer's Climate Justice joins the show with a vision for a green, red, and blue climate New Deal. That vision includes Native Americans, a blue New Deal for our threatened oceans, and a green New Deal for our coastal communities. Dr. Michael Greger joins us. Have you gained a few COVID pounds? In his new How Not to Diet cookbook, Dr. Greger tells how you can eat your way to a healthy, sustainable weight with plant-based meals. Terry Mills, president of the National Nursing Network, drops by on why a national nurse for public health is important. Plus, Laura Packard, the founder of Healthcare Voices, explains open enrollment under the ACA to help the 16+ million uninsured Americans get themselves enrolled. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are found. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I'm talking about, somebody on Twitter just said, I just listened to the first half hour of your show and I'm having a panic attack about COVID right now. I totally get it. We all should have been having panic attacks about COVID back in friggin' January. I mean, we knew by February that many of these symptoms were associated with COVID. The Chinese had published this in late January. But Donald Trump and the Trump administration not only lied to us about it and told us, oh, it's just like the flu, but then they actually encouraged Americans to get infected. The entire Republican Party has adopted this as basically an article of faith. Yes, getting infected is a good thing. Don't wear masks. And so we've got these mask holes who are running around going into stores. You know, the viral video of the young woman who was working, I think, with Burger King, and a couple of mask holes come in and start, you know, saying, oh, we have a religious exemption. And she's like, okay, I quit. I'm tired of putting up with these fools. And, there's a thread over on DU, same thing. Somebody's kid was working at a fast food restaurant where the manager refused to enforce mask policies. He got it, gave it to his parents. Now his parents have it. They're posting on DU. I mean, this is nuts. The Republican Party and the Trump administration have openly embraced a policy of infecting as many Americans as possible. So let's take a serious look. I think it's really important, and those of you on hold, I'll be picking up your calls in just a few minutes, but just give me another 4 or 5 minutes here. Take a serious look at what happens to people who don't die, who don't even end up in the hospital, but who get COVID. Because there's 17 million of us right now who are symptomatic enough to go through all the hassle of finding a testing place, waiting in line, or making an appointment, having something shoved halfway up into their brain, up into their sinuses anyway, and which is very uncomfortable. I know several people who've been through it now. And on top of those people who are symptomatic enough that they're thinking, gee, I better get tested, there's an equal number who have no symptoms but are going to be many of them are going to be suffering these symptoms long term. So back to the study. This is from Scripps Research Institute. These are, he said, people can present without any lung symptoms, just heart and brain involvement. These include cardiomyopathy, cardio-heart, myopathy, inflammation, dysfunction, I'm not sure the exact, but a disease of the heart muscle that makes it harder for your heart to pump, myocarditis or inflammation of the heart muscle, pericarditis, inflammation of the pericardium, that's the 2 layers of tissue that surround the heart and protect it. One study of 54 college athletes who had mild COVID cases found that a third have pericarditis, even though they had been symptom-free. 1/3 of them now have heart damage. Kate Meredith of Beverly, Massachusetts, for example, first got sick in March. Now she has tachycardia, or an abnormally elevated heart rate. I get up to do the dishes and it jumps to 140 beats a minute, she says. Can you imagine? Your heart just jumping out of your chest just because you stood up to do the dishes? For the rest of your life? Maybe? I mean, we don't know. It's only been around for a year, but typically with any other disease that causes these symptoms, it becomes long-term. Francis Simpson, a psychology lecturer at Coventry University in the UK, had allergic reactions. This is called mast cell activation syndrome. She has headaches, rashes all over her body, and extreme fatigue that has completely debilitated her. One peer, again, I'm reading from a study. I just tweeted the study out, by the way, or I tweeted it in response to somebody, so you may have to look at my tweets and responses of this actual study that I'm reading to you. This is from Vox.com. It's by Lois Parsley. It's titled Long-Term COVID-19 Effects, the Many Strange Symptoms Explained. One peer-reviewed study found that a surprising 40% of COVID-19 patients showed some kinds of neurological manifestation, and more than 30% have impaired cognition. Cognition is your ability to think. Cognitive processes. These include brain fog, extreme fatigue, difficulties with short-term memory, intense headaches, tingling, and numbness. Davis, the woman I mentioned earlier, for example, when she stands, blood pools. Now, she never was hospitalized. She had mild symptoms. She's still at home. But when she stands, blood pools in her lower extremities, making her feel faint and exacerbating her brain fog. The nervous system continues to release hormones to tighten her non-responding blood vessels, increasing her heart rate and making her entire body shake. A 40-year-old woman in Los Angeles has headaches, seizures, and hallucinations. They found RNA from the virus. They found the virus in her cerebral spinal fluid. It crosses the blood-brain barrier and gets in the brain. In fact, they note in the article, the virus can directly enter and damage cells in the brain's choroid plexus, which has cells with ACE2 receptors. Those are the receptors that the virus uses to get into cells. The brain is normally protected from your blood, so it's a big problem to have that barrier penetrated, writes Lois in Vox. Neuroinflammation can cause emotional and behavioral changes. One woman in the UK, she's talking about her 15-year-old daughter. She now has headaches, fatigue, extreme anxiety, and emotional outbursts. She's not a crier. She's normally very stoic, Sammy says. But over the last few months, she's had irrational outbursts, just sobbing her heart out. In the journal Lancet Psychiatry, Lancet, the preeminent medical journal in the world out of the UK, a study of 62,354 COVID patients. 1 in 5 were diagnosed with a mental disorder within 3 months of testing positive for the coronavirus. Gretchen Drown of Portland, Maine, also says her 15-year-old son has headaches and extreme fatigue, which worsen when he exerts himself, like trying to do his schoolwork. The American Academy of Pediatrics suggests that 11% of U.S. COVID-19 cases are children, with over 1.4 million children contracting the virus as of December 3rd. Symptoms reported in children are similar to adult long-haul cases: headaches, extreme fatigue, difficulty concentrating or forming new memories, anxiety, depression, tachycardia, dysautonomia, lingering or recurrent fevers. I mean, this is what Donald Trump said, oh, let's give it to as many people as possible, with his Fox News science advisors. Thank you, Rupert Murdoch. I guarantee you Rupert Murdoch is not going to let himself get exposed. Neither are his sons. Neither are the executives at Fox News. Neither is the talent at Fox News. They have all been living in very isolated bubbles, but they're perfectly happy to tell Americans, hey, it's just a fine thing. Fools. Anyhow, Mark in Sauk City, Wisconsin. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I was going to say an antidote to the Calvinist ideal is maybe people should reread A Christmas Carol. There's a reference in there to the surplus population, also the last image of the second spirit where the two starveling children beneath his robes. But here's a little bit more obscure one that, quoting to quote Dickens, "There's some upon this earth of ours, of yours, returned the Spirit, who lay claim to know us, who do their deeds of passion, pride, ill will, hatred, envy, bigotry, selfishness in our name, who are strange to us and all our kith and kin, as if they had never lived. Remember that and charge their doings on themselves, not to us."
It's echoing the Sermon on the Mount. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Mark, thank you. It's Charles Dickens, and A Christmas Carol is a brilliant story, and Charles Dickens absolutely got it. His father was thrown into the debtor's prison. I mean, he understood. You find that in David Copperfield, too. Mark, I got to run, but thank you. Lewis in Gadsden, Arizona. Hey, Lewis, it says you had COVID?
Yes, Tom. I survived it, barely, and afterwards, the following problems I'm having now is I'm a PTSD vet, and it's increased depression, short-term memory, tremors, and crying spells for someone that never cried in his life. Now, I'm going through a lot, and people better take COVID serious. I've had friends that have died who didn't believe in it, and I have a friend that's right now in ICU, and she never believed in it. Thank you for taking my call. God bless you.
Yeah. Thank you, Lewis. And God bless you, too. I hope you feel better. Lewis, thank you so much for the call. Wow. And now we're hearing, I read the story just a little bit ago in the newspaper, and I frankly, I don't remember the city. I'm sorry. But it was about ICU nurses, or not ICU nurses, but nurses in hospitals who are being offered the vaccine. In this particular hospital, I believe it was in Texas. In fact, I'm certain it was in Texas. And the nurses in this hospital being offered the vaccine, these are not the nurses who are working in the ICU, who see the COVID every day. They're the nurses who listen to right-wing talk radio as they're driving home. Half of them are refusing to take the vaccine because they say that they heard on right-wing talk radio that it's just a scam, it's a conspiracy, or they saw on the internet that, it's whatever. I don't even want to recite these conspiracy theories. You know what they are anyway. I mean, this is how when the President of the United States says something, a lot of Americans actually believe it.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And believing the President of the United States is not just killing people. We're going to have probably at least 6 or 7 million disabled, permanently disabled people from this disease. And welcome back. Marco in Los Angeles. Hey, Marco, what's up?
What's up is Calvinism and all this religious craziness. And James Madison, in the very first, in his amendment, wrote, Congress shall make no law establishing religion. That was changed to Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Those two things are totally different. Madison made our nation secular, but his 15 amendments were crammed down into 10 amendments, and the pro-slavery people and the white male domination people, they ripped out and changed what he wrote. If we would go to his 15 amendments, this country would be changed overnight. Overnight.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, it wasn't just Madison who wanted a wall of separation between church and state. It was the representatives of every state except Massachusetts. Massachusetts almost didn't join the Union over this issue because the Puritans and the Pilgrims had landed in Massachusetts. Massachusetts at that point in time, in 1789, was the only state that was still statewide enforcing a monthly tax on every family to support churches that in many of the Massachusetts cities was still enforcing a law where the churches would send people to go door to door and drive people out of their homes. And if you didn't show up in church, you were subject to fines or penalties, or you could even be put in the stocks. And that's how crazy it was in Massachusetts. That's why when he was 17 years old, Ben Franklin left Massachusetts, where he'd been born, and moved to Philadelphia. And he said, I absented myself from their assemblies and happily never returned. And he was talking about the churchgoers.
Yeah, and how are they different than the Trumpsters and everybody who's denying the pandemic and spitting on people and not wearing masks? That level of religion, whether it's anti-pandemic or religious craziness, that is what Madison said, no, that isn't here. But, as I said, the pro-slavery people and religious nuts like you're talking about, and the white male supremacy people, they changed all of his words, and we're living in it now. If we could just go back to that, if Richard Wolff or someone would come on and talk about it. Yeah, but it's right there. It's right there.
Yeah. But I think the big question is, did Trump pursue this, mass infection strategy because he actually believed his two Fox News science advisors, and he thought that this is actually the best thing for America? Or because it was the easiest way to go, because he's such a lazy SOB that he didn't want to have to sit in on meetings, he didn't want to mobilize the federal government, he didn't want to have to maybe raise taxes on rich people to pay for it. And so this was a convenient excuse. I don't know the answer to that question, but I tend to believe the latter rather than the former. I don't think I think in terms of science, I don't think he cares. I think it was an excuse for him.
The Trump's diagnosis of bone spurs was accurate, but they're not in his feet; they're in his head. That's our issue.
Yeah, there you go, Marco. Thanks for the call, and thanks for listening to KPFK. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. The Hidden History of Monopoly tells how Robert Bork, that guy from the Reagan era, transformed corporate America and destroyed the American dream. So for our Thom Hartmann Insider videotape that is over, or videotape, YouTube, whatever you want to call it, private video that's available over at ThomHartmann.com, I'm talking this week about Donald Trump just completely giving in to Erdogan of Turkey, the president of Turkey, the dictator of Turkey now. this theory that Jared Kushner okayed the killing, at least the capture, perhaps the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and to Mohammed bin Salman, and that Erdogan has the tape of it, and that when he called up Donald Trump a couple weeks ago and said, I want you to pull out of Syria and give me those Kurds so I can kill them and take that land, that he did it because Erdogan threatened him. And then Erdogan comes to the United States, a week or two later and gets a whole state dinner thing. Check it all out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. I think you'll find it fascinating. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Dan in Chicago. Hey, Dan, what's on your mind?
Hello, Tom. God bless you for all that you do. When
Thank you.
You can convince 7 million people, and maybe not as many, maybe more than that, that a snoot full of COVID is okay, but quality, affordable, comprehensive health care is not okay,
is socialism.
You have to stop. Yes, and you have to stop talking to those people. Republicans have convinced a segment of this country through, and I'm an African-American male, I'm 56 years of age. These people, I think catalyst is, it's hate. This is hate based on race. And they're using it to do a lot of different things. This whole thing about, immunity, that's quackery to start with. But when you can convince people of that, and also convince them that health care is not good for them. There was a caller about 2 months ago, you were talking to a caller, and you used an airplane analogy, and if 900 people every day were dying, would you get on board a plane after 10 days? And the man said yes. How do you respond to that? How do you continue to talk to someone like that? And I will say this, and I'm going to hang up. Thom Hartmann, who is known for loving the quality of a good debate, told the man, I have to stop talking to you. You're too stupid to continue to talk to. I know for you, Tom, to call someone stupid and hang the phone up on them is tough. You have a good day, Tom. God bless.
Thank you, Dan. Great to hear from you. Diamond in Hollywood. Hey, Diamond, what's up?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I am calling good. I'm calling for two things. I have read that some rich, Republicans are getting COVID. I believe it's because they're malignant narcissists and they believe they're invincible. However, I'm calling to say that basically the stimulus is really important for those of us who are performers and gig workers to get, because a lot of us have qualified for unemployment, but because of kinks in the system that are going on right now, we it's been months, we haven't gotten anything. And, I just think that that's so necessary to get.
Oh, yeah, Mitch McConnell has been refusing to pick up either of the two COVID recovery bills that the House of Representatives passed, one in May, one in July, the HEROES Act in May. I don't think there's a name for the one in July, but it was basically half the HEROES Act. And he's refused to do that because he wants to blackmail the Senate. He wants to cut a deal, and he needs maximum leverage. And maximum leverage means that you don't give in to anything until today or tomorrow, because this is when Congress is going to break for Christmas. And everybody knows that all the benefits and all the protections, including eviction protections, and it all ends in 2 weeks. And Congress will not be back because, next week is Christmas and the week after that is New Year's. And, this is the game McConnell is playing. And it's a game, by the way, that he's been playing for most of his career. This is what he does. The man's a sociopath. All he cares about is power and his own power. He has no principles. He has no governing theory other than I'm in charge. He has, he has no economic ideology. He's never expressed that. It's just whatever's going to gain him power. Diamond, spot on. Thank you. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Yeah, hey, when you mentioned Calvinism, it reminded me of Dorothy Parker's quote when she said humorously, if you want to know what God thinks of money, look at who he gave it to. And, obviously. But as far as the part about ED for people who get the disease,
erectile dysfunction,
they should play it up. Yeah. They should play it up as much as possible. My ex-wife works in the jewelry business, and they use cyanide to strip gold off of things. And these Russian jewelry workers would stand over the tank with the cyanide, and she told them stop doing it, and they didn't care. And one day she said, if you do that, you're going to become impotent. And they all backed off. And that was the thing that real.
We should run a TV commercial, where there's a couple in bed and the guy is going, I'm so sorry, honey, I thought I could do it, but since I had COVID, I just can't. And she's got this harump look on her face, and maybe make him look like one of these so-called militia guys. That would be effective, Bill. That would be a PSA that the Ad Council should be working on right now.
Right. I also wanted to extend my respect to the McConnell family to becoming a one-income family now. It's going to be tough, I know.
You're talking about Elaine Chao?
For jobs.
Oh, because Elaine Chao still, she's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She's the heir to a shipping fortune, so she still has an income.
Family now.
Yeah, I got it. Bill, thanks a lot for the call. Okay, we're going to do a deep dive into something totally non-COVID, extrasensory perception, and the federal government. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code THOM. The Clean Phone Pro phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. X-Chair, changing the world one seat at a time. More information at xchairtom.com. Bloomsy Box, simply better blooms. More info available at bloomsybox.com, code TOM. And Boll & Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bollandbranch.com, code TOM.
Today and tomorrow are your last chances to get that really good feeling knowing that you have become part of the solution instead of the problem, or instead of just standing on the sidelines. Last chance to pitch in to help Free Speech TV. We are behind. We need your help. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. If you value this network, if you value the programming on this network, my show and all the others, call now. Call now and let them know that you're listening. Let them know that you're watching. Let them know that you care about Free Speech TV. You want to support Free Speech TV. You want to keep this network going. And most important, make a monthly sustaining contribution. These are the most important contributions you can make to Free Speech TV because they provide them with the ability to budget. They know what's coming in. And right now they represent just a little tiny slice of their pledge drive income. And I want to get that up to the point where instead of the one-time gifts being their principal source, it's, they've got this foundation, and then the one-time gifts become like the icing on the cake sort of thing, And so, yes, please, by all means, give a one-time gift and get one of the premiums that they have. But then also tell them, yeah, I want that book, I want that book on oligarchy. That's going to be a really good book. And so, I'll give you $120 right now. But by the way, would you take $10 a month off my credit card, until I tell you to stop, or for the next year or whatever? That way, and that makes you a sustaining member. You get the really cool refrigerator magnet calendar. It's a calendar for your refrigerator that's held on magnetic. You get that. But it also means that you're helping Free Speech TV with their budgeting and with their planning going forward. You're basically becoming a day-to-day part of Free Speech TV rather than just an occasional supporter. It's really important. It's really, really useful and helpful and important. There are a whole bunch of premiums for those one-time gifts that I was just talking about. With a $20 gift, you get the Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the Free Speech TV Fight for Democracy sticker. With a $50 gift, there is the Change Never Happens from the Top Down tote bag. Really nice, good, well-made canvas tote bag. Or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, you have your choice of the Free Speech TV black hat or the Thom Hartmann Program mug. This is something that no other program can offer you. So the Thom Hartmann Program mug, I think it's a really cool thing. That's with $75. With a $100 gift, you have your choice of 2 Free Speech TV face masks or the 2010 quarantine Free Speech TV tumbler. The kind of I survived 2020, excuse me, if I said 2010 before, you know what I meant. With a $120 gift, too many 20s and 1s here. With a $120 gift, there's the Ask Me About Free Speech TV t-shirt or the social distancing kit, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the Free Speech TV hand sanitizer, or my book, The Hidden History of Monopolies, which talks about the $5,000 tax that we all pay every year because our economy over the last 40 years, since Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Act back in 1982, our economy has come to be dominated by giant corporations that are just squeezing us dry. And where is all that money going? It's popping into the pockets of the billionaires who are, the ones who own those corporations. So that's The Hidden History of Monopolies, or the new book. And I've been saying it's going to come out in the spring. I just had that in my head, but Louise was telling me yesterday, this book is going to actually be out in late January, early February. So you may get it sooner than I thought. And it's The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, and it's tracing the rise of the hard right in the United States and the history of the United States. We actually have an oligarchic history, and it's fascinating and a little chilling. And so, be well armed for those debates and arguments and know what's going on. So those are all $120 gifts. With a $240 gift, you can join us for a Free Speech TV meet and greet online. We do a Zoom call, get a dozen people together and just hang out for an hour and talk about whatever's on your mind, and I'll answer any questions I can. And sometimes I ask questions, and we'll have a good time. You can come in you can have a camera on, or you can have your camera off. It's fine. Some people just don't want to show their faces. That's good. Or you can get both the Oligarchy and the Monopoly book, the Thom Hartmann Democracy book set. That's with a $240 gift. With a $360 gift, there's The Hidden History of Oligarchy, The Hidden History of Monopolies, a set of 2 face masks, and the Quarantine 2020 tumbler, making the $360 gift a real deal. And with a $1,000 gift, get in line. You can come to Portland and hang out with us when all this craziness of COVID is over. So a lot of options there, a lot of different possible choices. But the bottom line is, I've been talking a lot about, I want to hit our goal by the end of the week so that Andrew from San Diego's $10,000 gets kicked in. I also want to hit our goal because I want to keep this network going. I don't want them to have to lay off people or tighten their belt. I want them to grow. I want them to be stronger. And you do too, I'm sure. So please call now, 877-37.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. One of my very, very closest friends is a professor of neuroscience in Australia. In fact, he's been a guest on our program quite some time back. And my friend Richard recommended that I get in touch with Dr. Edwin C. May. He's a PhD nuclear physicist and the founder and director of the Laboratories for Fundamental Research. And what I learned blew my mind, and I wanted to reach out to Dr. May and say, hey, can we talk about this? I think this stuff is fascinating. It opens doors to conversations about the physical universe, about physics, about psychology and how we think and how our psychology affects our understanding of reality itself, and to the possibility that there are senses that we haven't yet discovered, or even realms that we haven't discovered, much like back in the day, back 150 years ago, if you said to somebody, someday somebody 1,000 miles away from you will appear in your living room on a screen, 4 feet wide, and be able to have a conversation with you in real time, and they would have said, come on, you're crazy. You're crazy. That doesn't exist. Because what? Radio waves? What's that? So on the line with us is Dr. Edwin C. May. He is a PhD, founder, director of the Laboratories for Fundamental Research. LFR.org is the website. And Dr. May, first of all, welcome to the program. But secondly, tell us, for 20 years, you worked with and for the federal government. Tell us about that program.
Well, good morning, Tom. Thanks for having me on. You laid the groundwork beautifully, and I really appreciate it. Yes, it all started way back when, Doctor, I'm laying on my couch to tell you about all this, when a Soviet information scientist, Ippolit Moseyevich Kogan, an information guy, wrote a paper in 1969, I believe, claiming telepathy is possible. And he gave an explanation of how it worked. That really terrified the U.S. intelligence community at the moment. But in 1974, the CIA got very, very interested in this. If it were real, that's a big if, then they would it's obvious. If you could collect intelligence by just sitting in your living room and learning by some magical ESP way what's going on in Russia, that would be valuable. But they didn't believe that at first. And so they initiated a program at what was then called Stanford Research Institute in Menlo Park, California. And my colleagues, Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, started the program in '74. They had permission from the director of CIA at the time, a guy by the name of William Colby, to begin all this. And long story short, it appeared to be real, and they were really excited about it and used it throughout 20 years of that program, which is known popularly as the Stargate program, having nothing to do with that science fiction show.
So this was an actual program that was funded with U.S. government funding, that was overseen by the CIA, that hired these colleagues of yours and ultimately hired you too to do this 20-year investigation in the possibility that we could spy on the Russians using ESP, and you found that there was some evidence for it. How did it work? What were the protocols, and what did you all learn from this?
Well, one of the things we learned about it was that it was useful, and like other forms of humans gathering intelligence, back in when they had spies on the ground sneaking around behind enemy lines in World War II, human gathering of intelligence, called humans, is very unreliable. Did I count the number of tanks right, or did I miss 20 of them? That's kind of problem, right? And so the ESP portion of this was as good as human spies on the ground and as bad as that. That doesn't mean it was not useful. So the way it worked and the way it would work in a laboratory setting is I have a collection of photographs, let's say, sitting on my desk here in California, and you're up in Oregon, and I randomly choose one of those pictures with a random system, and I say, "Okay, Tom, please tell me what's in your mind with regard to the picture I just chose." Now, I don't even know it myself because it's just a number somewhere. And oddly enough, under laboratory detailed conditions, you were able to do that some of the time, way above chance. And that says, hey, something really interesting is going on, and it may inform us about how we can get information across space and time and what's going on in our brain when we are receiving that stuff.
Now, you are a physicist. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Can you, does this have to do with quantum entanglement, in your opinion?
Oh, my favorite unhappy question, no. We don't think that quantum entanglement has anything to do with the brain, and there's lots of scientific papers on that, why that is not the case, although it's a popular idea, and as a metaphor, it's pretty cool. But there's no evidence of it that quantum entanglement. Quantum mechanics, of course, involves how all the atoms work and all that down at the micro level. And our brains, most of them, are full of atoms and their neurons and so on. So it is a quantum mechanical thing we have between our ears, but not the entanglement part of it.
Okay, and the entanglement being, you know, if you split a particle in two and one part goes flying off in one direction and the other particle goes off flying in the other direction, if you rotate the first particle, the second particle will instantaneously rotate identically, even though they might be separated by, you know, hundreds of billions of miles or trillions of miles, and they entangle at faster than the speed of light. Am I correctly describing quantum entanglement?
Close enough for government work, so to speak.
Right. Okay.
The Chinese, yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, finish your thought.
Yeah, the Chinese have the all-time record of this. They were able to show entanglement over a few hundred kilometers by bouncing beams of light up into a satellite and back down again. That's the current record where entanglement works. And I want to tell you an idea about entanglement, and that has to do with quantum decoherence is a technical term, but I'll make it like this. Suppose you and I have children, and we are both our kids in the park, and we're side by side, and the kids are swinging back and forth, and those two kids are correlated. When you push your kid forward, my kid moves forward, and if you push your kid backwards and back, and so on. But then I carefully cut the swing in half, and take my swing and travel carefully to New York. And so you should know instantaneously that when your kid goes forward, my kid's going forward. There's a problem. Right. Unknown to you, I took my kid out for a pizza. That's called environmental decoherence.
Aha. Okay. And so we don't think that this mechanism that seems to be extrasensory perception is based in quantum physics. What is it based in?
Well, we're lazy. At least I'm lazy as a physicist. If I don't have to invent anything new, I'm not about to go ahead and do just that. So look at the normal sensory systems. If you're lying on your back on a nice cloudless evening and enjoying the stars above you, and all of a sudden you see a satellite go over it, your attention is drawn to something that's moving. And that's true with all our sensory systems. If you're at a party and somebody walks in with too much cologne or perfume, you know it immediately. But then after a while, you get used to it. The technical term is habituate to it. So we said, okay, if all of our sensory systems act that way, ESP, sensory, must also act that way. And yes, we found a way of showing that some things, when they're changing, are more likely to be seen, recognized, than things that are not. For example, suppose you're standing, 200,000 years ago on the edge of the savannah in Africa, and you glance over and you see you glance over and see the grass, and it's not moving, but you notice the leopard has changed.
Right. And this is this is wired into us. This is survival stuff. This is fascinating. Totally. Dr. Edwin C. May is with us. He's the founder and director of the Laboratories for Fundamental Research. LFR.org is the website. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Is it possible ESP is real? Stick around. So, Professor May, or Dr. May, you described one experimental study where somebody looks at a picture and, or actually you weren't even looking at a picture, you were selecting a picture but not looking at it, and somebody else far away was able to guess that with higher than random chance probability?
Absolutely, that's correct.
Does it make a difference whether the person looks at the picture or not?
Well, we've looked at that actually scientifically as much as we possibly can, and no, it does not seem to matter whether somebody's looking at it or not. But the key feature is if I'm actually looking at it, I can't hold a conversation with you because for all kinds of nonverbal ways, I will tell you what the picture actually is. So that has to be what's called double-blind conditions, and we're fastidious about that.
Right. Did you try putting people in Faraday cages? These are for people who don't know what this is. This is basically a metal box or a mesh box through which no radio waves can penetrate.
Yeah, we've even gone further than that. We've done experiments in an underwater submersible, not a military submarine, but a submarine nonetheless. You know, go down 300 feet in water surrounded by it, which is a pretty good shield, and it still works.
Have you found anything that can block it from working?
No. Now that raises a whole lot of other interesting questions. From what time frame? When is that information available? And that's an open question in research, and we're all a little bit crazy about it. I'm going to move a little bit out of the sun here. How's that?
No, that's good. Well, actually, I can't see you, so I'm coming in remote. So I'm just looking at a little. I'm just looking at a camera, so I can't see what the show looks like. But it's fine. So when the government stopped this project, what happened?
Well, there was a lot of controversy, and I was asked by a senator to write a critique of why the government stopped it. And I wrote that in 1996. And it turns out it was completely wrong. In the years 2000, 2003, the CIA released 89,000 pages of our formerly classified data. And in there, we found a memo from from Congress to the CIA saying, hey, our budgets have gone down, the Cold War is over, you need to slim down the various projects you are using, and if you don't do that, we're going to close down the CIA. Quite literally, they said that. So we were one of the programs that got axed. And even,
was that incidental or intentional?
Intentional. And the CIA came back to us 43 times with separate intelligence missions. They were happy with us, but they had to kill it or Congress would be all over them. Not just on our program, lots of other ancillary programs hit the dust then.
Are there other countries continuing to pursue this?
It's an educated yes, but I don't have any firsthand information, I think. At least I hope so. We all could use this as an adjunct in our time of international terrorism.
Yeah. This is remarkable stuff. We'll continue the conversation in just a moment. We're talking with Dr. Edwin C. May, a nuclear physicist, the founder and director of the Laboratories for Fundamental Research, LFR.org. Stick around with it. The hidden history of guns and the Second Amendment tells how the Second Amendment was written to protect Georgia's slave patrols. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Census are an interesting thing. Dr. Edwin C. May is with us. Dr. May, dogs their olfactory bulb, their smelling mechanism, maps to the part of their brain that we use to see with, to the occipital cortex. And so, the theory is that dogs can actually see smells. When they're traveling around, they can map smells in ways that are unimaginable to us. They just found that dinosaurs and apparently some birds still have vestigial parts of this, have a whole set of little tiny holes with sensors in their beaks or in the front of their mouths that are apparently so sensitive, and some birds still have this, apparently, the birds that like eat clams along the seashore, that are so sensitive at detecting motion under the ground. Again, something that we could never do, that they can just stick their nose right down into the ground and pull up a worm or a clam. I think everybody has, we used to always think that there were 5 senses. Then some, smart wag came along and said, well, what about the vestibular system? The inner ear. It measures gravity. We all have a gravitometer in us. So we actually have a sensory, and it's why we can stand up straight. And so we all have a gravity sensory system. So that makes 6. And are you suggesting that what is at work here is another sensory system that we're just not familiar with, we don't customarily use, or that in many people it has atrophied?
Hey, Tom, would you like a job in my lab? That's exactly the right question. The answer is yes. And actually, there are more sensory systems of the kind. We can do echolocation and some pretty bizarre things, detect magnetic fields of the normal variety in our brain. And so I'm proposing, and my colleagues do also, that, we're dealing with yet again another sensory system.
Well, I've known for years that I'm extraordinarily good with directions. You can put me pretty much anywhere. I lived a summer, my friend Clark Stinson and I hauled a couple of teepees, a 3-day hike up into the Chippewa National Forest in northern Michigan. And we're literally in the middle of nowhere. And we spent the summer there doing what we thought was spiritual practice. But I could always find my way in and out of anywhere. I have just this, I have an internal compass. And I know people like it. My father was like that. My wife, on the other hand, nothing there. Doesn't. If you said which way is north, she'd have to look at the sky. And I didn't need to look at the sky. I can do it in the middle of the night. So I'm assuming, and we know now this is how birds migrate. This is how insects migrate. This is, built into lots and lots of animals. And apparently some little fragment of it is still built into us. So what's the mechanism of this sensory system that you're suggesting?
Don't know exactly. That's clearly a big issue. One of the other big issues that we have of people who can do this under laboratory conditions don't know when they can do it or when it's happening. Give an example here. We have complicated experiments, and one of the so-called psychics is coming to the lab, and they park in the parking lot, and everything psychic that's going to happen to them happens at that point, not when they come into the laboratory and get wired for EEG or whatever things we're measuring. And that's extremely frustrating because these people don't know when they're psychic.
Do they get the information before it's, quote, sent?
Yes.
Are we having time distortions here, too?
Something like that, sure. I'll give you an example of how frustrating it can be. If we humans had access to all space and all time all at once and were cognitively aware of, I'll use a technical term, we'd all go bull goose loony in a heartbeat. We have to be able to slow down that or
filter,
winnow out the bad stuff. We do that visually and auditory. You go to a restaurant having a nice conversation with somebody and somebody drops a big tray of dishes. You learn to ignore that and continue the conversation. So one of the big pressing issues of our research right now is say, hey, what opens that door to this vast array of information over space and time? And more importantly, what closes it? We don't have much of a clue on either of those, and it's really quite frustrating to the researchers.
3 times in the last, since COVID started, and this has happened to me many times throughout my life, but it seems to be happening with increasing frequency. I will suddenly think of somebody that I literally, in one case it was somebody that I knew from childhood, that I literally hadn't thought of since I was probably 12 years old, somebody I knew when I was 8 or 9 years old. Another one was a person that I was friends with for maybe 6 months back in the late 60s. And a third one was a person that I had met while traveling in the 80s and, got to know for a few weeks in semi-social situations. And again, none of these three people had I even thought about once in probably 20 years. And they would just pop into my mind. And in all three cases, now that's not to say these are the only people who popped into my mind, but in all three cases, within 48 hours, those people reached out to me. I didn't reach out to them. And, hey, I found your email on the internet. It's been a long time. How are you? And is this a common thing?
Yes, very common.
Is this part of this?
Yes. Well, there are other reasons too, but certainly ESP might be a component of that. I'm not going to say that every experience we humans have is always mediated by some extrasensory perception, but there are two possible ways that can happen. One is you had a telepathic view, you got that information, or maybe you dreamt about it. ESP happens a lot in dreams. There was a big laboratory in Brooklyn for years about dream telepathy. But what may happen, you've got that through telepathic means, whatever that happens to be, or the people in your future were contacting you, and you had access to that future information. How's that?
Huh. That's even weirder. This is really weird stuff. Funded for 20 years by the U.S. government. I want to find out why the government stopped funding it and what they had to say about that and what other things you learned. We're talking with Dr. Edwin C. May, a nuclear physicist, the founder and director of the Laboratories for Fundamental Research, IFR,
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Why is the U.S. government doing ESP research for spying, and what came out of it? Today and tomorrow are your last chances to get that really good feeling knowing that you have become part of the solution instead of the problem, or instead of just standing on the sidelines. Last chance to pitch in to help Free Speech TV. We are behind. We need your help. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. If you value this network, if you value the programming on this network, my show and all the others, call now. Call now and let them know that you're listening. Let them know that you're watching. Let them know that you care about Free Speech TV. You want to support Free Speech TV. You want to keep this network going. And most important, make a monthly sustaining contribution. These are the most important contributions you can make to Free Speech TV because they provide them with the ability to budget. They know what's coming in. And right now they represent just a little tiny slice of their pledge drive income. And I want to get that up to the point where instead of the one-time gifts being their principal source, it's, they've got this foundation, and then the one-time gifts become like the icing on the cake sort of thing, And so, yes, please, by all means, give a one-time gift and get one of the premiums that they have. But then also tell them, yeah, I want that book, I want that book on oligarchy. That's going to be a really good book. And so, I'll give you $120 right now. But by the way, would you take $10 a month off my credit card, until I tell you to stop, or for the next year or whatever? That way, and that makes you a sustaining member. You get the really cool refrigerator magnet calendar. It's a calendar for your refrigerator that's held on magnetic. You get that. But it also means that you're helping Free Speech TV with their budgeting and with their planning going forward. You're basically becoming a day-to-day part of Free Speech TV rather than just an occasional supporter. It's really important. It's really, really useful and helpful and important. There are a whole bunch of premiums for those one-time gifts that I was just talking about. With a $20 gift, you get the Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the Free Speech TV Fight for Democracy sticker. With a $50 gift, There is the Change Never Happens from the Top Down tote bag, really nice, good, well-made canvas tote bag, or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, you have your choice of the Free Speech TV black hat or the Thom Hartmann Program mug. This is something that no other program can offer you. So the Thom Hartmann Program mug, I think it's a really cool thing. That's with $75. With a $100 gift, you have your choice of 2 Free Speech TV face masks or the 2010 quarantine Free Speech TV tumbler. You know, kind of I survived 2020, excuse me. If I said 2010 before, you know what I meant. With a $120 gift, too many 20s and 1s here. With a $120 gift, there's the Ask Me About Free Speech TV t-shirt, or the social distancing kit, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the Free Speech TV hand sanitizer, or my book, The Hidden History of Monopolies, which talks about the $5,000 tax that we all pay every year because our economy over the last 40 years, since Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Act back in 1982, our economy has come to be dominated by giant corporations that are just squeezing us dry. And where is all that money going? It's popping into the pockets of the billionaires who are, the ones who own those corporations. So that's The Hidden History of Monopolies, or the new book. And I've been saying it's going to come out in the spring. I just had that in my head, but Louise was telling me yesterday, this book is going to actually be out in late January, early February. So you may get it sooner than I thought. And it's The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, and it's tracing the rise of the hard right in the United States and the history of the United States. We actually have an oligarchic history, and it's fascinating and a little chilling. And so, be well armed for those debates and arguments and know what's going on. So those are all $120 gifts. With a $240 gift, you can join us for a Free Speech TV meet and greet online. We do a Zoom call, get a dozen people together and just hang out for an hour and talk about whatever's on your mind. And I'll answer any questions I can. And sometimes I ask questions, and we'll have a good time. You can come in you can have a camera on, or you can have your camera off. It's fine. Some people just don't want to show their faces. That's good. Or you can get both the Oligarchy and the Monopoly book, the Thom Hartmann Democracy book set. That's with a $240 gift. With a $360 gift, there's The Hidden History of Oligarchy, The Hidden History of Monopolies, a set of 2 face masks, and the Quarantine 2020 tumbler, making the $360 gift a real deal. And with a $1,000 gift, get in line. You can come to Portland and hang out with us when all this craziness of COVID is over. So a lot of options there, a lot of different possible choices. But the bottom line is, I've been talking a lot about, I want to hit our goal by the end of the week so that Andrew from San Diego's $10,000 gets kicked in. I also want to hit our goal because I want to keep this network going. I don't want them to have to lay off people or tighten their belt. I want them to grow. I want them to be stronger. And you do too, I'm sure. So please call now, 877-37. On this week's Science Revolution, Vien Trong with Tom Steyer's Climate Justice joins the show with a vision for a green, red, and blue climate New Deal. That vision includes Native Americans, a blue New Deal for our threatened oceans, and a green New Deal for our coastal communities. Dr. Michael Greger joins us. Have you gained a few COVID pounds? In his new How Not to Diet cookbook, Dr. Greger tells how you can eat your way to a healthy, sustainable weight with plant-based meals. Terry Mills, president of the National Nursing Network, drops by on why a national nurse for public health is important. Plus, Laura Packard, the founder of Healthcare Voices, explains open enrollment under the ACA to help the 16+ million uninsured Americans get themselves enrolled. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are found. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. From 1975 until 1995, for 20 years, the U.S. federal government, our federal government, via the CIA, sponsored a program to collect intelligence, not just to do the experiments and things, but actually to spy on the Soviet Union using so-called psychics. And the program, has nothing to do with the crazy nonsense you see online. This was a serious program. The unclassified name was Stargate. I just tweeted a book that has the declassified work of this group. I just tweeted that out just a moment ago. There are 89,000 pages in this document that was declassified by the CIA in 2003. It's been published in 4 volumes in this work. And the foreword for this was written by former Republican senator from Maine and then Bill Clinton Defense Secretary William Cohen, who knew about the program and expressed its value. This is not, we're not having a theoretical conversation here about airy-fairy stuff. This is serious stuff. The Defense Intelligence Agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Engagement, 19 military and intelligence units in the federal government were involved in 504 separate intelligence missions using this program. And one of the people who helped put it together and run it for 20 years, Dr. Edwin C. May, is on the line with us, a nuclear physicist. He's the founder and director of the Laboratories for Fundamental Research. Dr. May, just to recap real quickly, when this program was ended in 1995, why was it ended? Oh, Dr. May, I'm sorry, I forgot to put you back on the air. My bad. You're back on the air now. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's a good question. And when I first started thinking about that seriously, Senator Cohen had asked me to write a piece complaining about what the CIA did. In the 1995 budget for the intelligence and military community, there was a piece in there that said that the CIA should take over the program from the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is where it resides, if they did a 20-year evaluation of the program and found it to be useful. Well, they said in their report, no, even though ESP is probably real, it was never, ever useful. And I thought, well, wait a minute, hold on, that's not true. The CIA, came at us with 43 separate missions to do spying and so on. So years later, it wasn't until last year when I was reading some of the released documents that appear in Volume 4 of that set, where the truth came out, that the Cold War was over. There was budget reduction in Congress for spying on anybody because the Cold War was over. And then we have a memo which is published from the CIA, from Congress to the CIA, threatening them that if they don't slim down their large number of small programs, that they might even shut down the CIA from the get-go. And I was shocked to see that. But that's the main reason they shut it off.
I can imagine, if I was a senator and I had oversight over the CIA's budget and I thought the CIA was doing crackpot research into ESP, saying, hey, quit wasting money. I get that. Yeah. And I can imagine maybe some senators saying, hey, if this stuff is true and it really works, this could be a dangerous Pandora's box that we don't want to open, although that kind of ignores the fact that other countries are doing the same kind of research. What do you think was the essential motivation for that threat to the CIA that ended this program? And do you have any knowledge that similar programs have been revived since then, or are we now, so deeply into the internet age that it's much easier to spy on people simply by intercepting their emails?
Yeah, I argue with my colleagues about that. I do not think, but I hope I'm wrong here, that elements within our government are doing this anymore. And it turns out to be a sociological issue more than anything. I spent a decade with my colleagues after the program was formally closed to try to restart it, given the era of terrorism. I've even tried to do joint forces with former adversaries in Russia, the ex-KGB guys, who I'm now quite friendly with. They wanted a joint program with our program to work the issues of counterterrorism, and that was turned down by us, by the U.S.
If I correctly understood what you said earlier, which is that you've got one guy sitting in New York City, and he is in 20 minutes when the guy in Los Angeles arrives at the laboratory and steps into the Faraday shield or whatever, you know, steps into the laboratory and starts trying to read the mind of the guy in New York. At that point, the guy in New York is going to pull a card out with a picture on it, and it's got a number on the back, and he's just going to see the number, and the guy in Los Angeles is going to be able to describe the picture. That as that guy in Los Angeles is pulling into the parking lot of the building, and the guy in New York has not yet pulled the random card from the stack, the guy in Los Angeles already knows what the picture is going to be. If I'm accurately redescribing what I thought I heard you say in the last half hour, that calls into question our understanding of time as well as space. I mean, is this consistent or inconsistent with Albert Einstein's notions of time and space, or am I completely mischaracterizing what you said?
No, you did it exactly right. We conducted one really bizarre experiment you know, the moon of Jupiter the innermost moon of Jupiter goes around Jupiter every 3 hours, and unlike our moon, they have a lunar eclipse on Jupiter. If you were sitting there watching it, you would see the thing. And we had people here try to determine when that time where the moon on Jupiter was half lit. That was what we were looking for, and our people could get that time to plus or minus 10 seconds of the actual time. Now the question is, did they do that before the light came back to Earth? It took 40 minutes to do that.
That is faster than the speed of light, isn't it, for a distance to Jupiter, or maybe not? I don't know how far away Jupiter is.
Well, the question was
light travels 186,000 miles a second, right?
Yeah, it was 40 light minutes takes 40 minutes for the light to propagate here. So the question is, did they do it when our telescopes here were measuring it, or did they do it while at Jupiter time? The answer is, I'm sorry to tell you, it was as if our remote viewing participants were sitting on Jupiter. They did it in the Jupiter time frame.
So this blows up the idea that time and space are just linear continuums.
Well, if that's the case, now I'll tell you the same problem we had about the telepathy thing. Did the remote viewer or the participant in the experiment get the data from the actual moon as it went around Jupiter, or did that person look into their future when we told them how well they did from the telescope imagery? We have yet to figure out a way to separate those two things out.
Wow.
It's
now,
a giant pain, I'll tell you.
Yeah. John Quimby wrote a book back in the mid-1800s that Mary Baker Eddy largely plagiarized and created this thing called Christian Science. And in Christian Science, a religion for which actually I have a lot of respect. I've known a number of Christian scientists throughout my life. And, you know, people ask for prayer from total strangers. You know, they ask for prayer from other Christian scientists, and people sit down and in a fairly methodical way pray for them, typically for things like physical and mental health. And you've got an entire religion here that's lasted 150 years that asserts that this is true. And I know that there was a Harvard study that suggested that it was true, that it did work, and then there was another study that sought to debunk that. We have about a minute before we hit a break here. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, there have actually been some very careful studies about the role of intercessory prayer affecting somebody at a distance. Now, if I'm going to heal you right in front of you, that doesn't count because I can, you know, putting hands on you for healing. But no, if I'm in L.A. and you're in Portland, is there a way I can use prayer to affect your physical health? Well, there's a secondary aspect. The answer appears not to be the case. I don't believe that's the case from hard science. There's another explanation for the observable.
Okay. So, you know, which makes sense. I mean, health is such a huge and complex system, whereas we're talking about a very, very delicate, you know, just catching a fragment of a thought here, are we not?
Yeah, and we ignored healing throughout the entire Stargate era because it is such a difficult issue. What constitutes getting better and what's not? How much is the individual responsible for their own health and so on? And so we said, hey, we got something else to worry about. Let's not do that.
Yeah, this is remarkable. I think we're in a break, Sean. Right? Yeah, there we go. There's the music. We're talking with Dr. Edwin May. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Stick around. Nuclear physicist Dr. Edwin May, the founder and director of the Laboratories for Fundamental Research, is with us about a project that the CIA ran for 20 years. And welcome back. Dr. May, when you were working in and helping to run the Stargate program, its unclassified name, did you all explore the idea of collective consciousness? I mean, the entire conversation we've had up to this point is a connection between two individuals. But what about the mass of humanity?
Well, that's an interesting question. A lot of people interested in that collective consciousness, and some very bright people have written about it extensively. We had such a narrowly defined mission to spy. We could not explore a lot of interesting things we'd love to, that being one of them. We did try some things having multiple remote viewers, multiple subjects, multiple psychics to try to get the same answer. And that, for reasons we don't currently understand, never worked, which is odd.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But one of the things I'd like to talk about when we get back on full on the air, and that is, why is it that the government believed that this is true, and why I personally believe that we have a genuine phenomena. And I think I can describe that in terms of no statistics and what have you, for our audience to get a grasp of how really interesting this stuff is, because it's real.
Okay, we'll pick that up on the other side of this break in about a minute and a half. My wife is very fond of Sufi Sam. He was a 60s guru guy. She's not fond of him, but he had an idea that, reincarnation isn't a thing. What actually happens is, when we die, we just kind of all scatter into the collective soup, and then the creator is like the great goulash server. He reaches into it with a ladle and pours it into a new body, and so we're all little bits of everybody else, this collective consciousness idea. Did you go anywhere near anything like that?
No, except he used the magic word. My mother was full-blooded Hungarian, so I'm partial to goulash.
Okay. Yeah, but it's just like you throw all the vegetables into the pot, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so what, were you discouraged from going after collective consciousness stuff, or did you just touched it?
We chose not to do it. I'll give you one example. I was I had some money to do a MRI experiment in Edinburgh, Scotland. And I actually gave the money back because I did not know whose head to put in the scanner or when to put them in the scanner. It would be a huge waste of money. We reprogrammed it for some other tasking. But there was an example that makes it very difficult to do research in this area, to ask not only technical questions in the lab, but even broader, more interesting questions like, what's the nature of reality? How do we have access to all this stuff? How does that all work? Very difficult to do quantitative experiments. However, the data is real.
Yeah. And did this give you the thought that you may have an answer to what is the nature of reality?
I can get clobbered a lot with my friends who are listening to this interview because they will disagree with me. I've got some idea about it, yes. We could talk of that after the break.
Okay, great. We'll be right back. We're talking with Dr. Edwin May, PhD, founder and director of the Laboratories for Fundamental Research, about the Stargate program that the CIA funded from 1975 to 1995. And the collection of the published data is published with a foreword by William Cohen, the former Defense Secretary. Latest hidden history books on monopoly and oligarchy, wherever fine books are found. Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Edwin C. May, a nuclear physicist who is the director of the Laboratories for Fundamental Research right now, and back from 75 to 95 was working with and for the CIA and the Department of Defense on a study of PSI, of psychic phenomena. Dr. May, you mentioned the question why when we were talking during the break. Let me just give you, run of the show here. What did you mean, and where do you want to go with that?
Well, people always ask me, why do I think this is a genuine phenomenon? Why does the government think that? And sure, I could go off the geeky cliff and start quoting statistics and all that, and put your listening audience to sleep. A better question. Tom, let's suppose you were going to open up a restaurant in Portland, and you have the best chef in Oregon, and it's a small little place that only seats 19 people, and you have a great menu and a wine cellar, blah, blah, blah. On opening night, 19 people come and fill up your restaurant. And then for the next week or two, 17 of those original 19 customers are coming back. What would you conclude about the quality of your restaurant? What would it? I mean,
people think it's great.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, now, as you said earlier, we had 19 customers for spying. The usual suspects, the CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, the Secret Service, the NSA, and so on. Of those 19 customers who came, 17 of them returned with new and fresh spying missions. They wouldn't do that if this weren't real. That's what convinces me, and it also convinced the government. But, Tom, I'd like to correct one thing, though. The CIA quit funding our program in 1975. The massive amount of funding we had was from the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Medical Research and Development Command of the United States Army.
I see. Okay.
They were the biggest funders.
What does this tell us, or is it even reasonable to try to draw conclusions from this other than that, hey, there's something here, we should be looking at this again, and is anybody doing that? And then, well, let's start with that.
Yes. I'm working now with a group of neuroscientists, young neuroscientists. I'm getting old. It's time for some young people to take over. And they are committed to understanding what is going on in the brain from someone who can do this under laboratory conditions compared to someone who can't do it at all under laboratory conditions. That will teach us something about the brain we currently don't understand. Also, how that information gets from India tomorrow to today here, that's something else that maybe we'll learn something about space and time. But those probably, it's going to be 20, 50 years from now.
In your opinion, I mean, given that you've conducted thousands of these experiments and hundreds of spying missions on behalf of 19 different U.S. federal agencies, yeah. Do you think that the people who are particularly good, that what separates people who are particularly good from this from people who are particularly bad at it, or like Louise and I with regard to directionality and presumably magnetism, because we know now that there are actually cells that have a lot of iron that can react to to the Earth's magnetic field, and the birds make use of that and whatnot. Do you think that it's that we all have the ability and some of us have encouraged and built it? I mean, when I was a kid, my mom got me into praying for other people, and I literally think every day of my life since I was a teenager, I try to pray for somebody because I think there's something there. Is that developing this sense, or is it that some people just don't have it, that they might be lacking an organ or a type of cell or something?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm lazy. If I don't have to invent something new, I won't. And if you look at all other human capacity, there are some people that can play, a piano for Carnegie Hall, and other people can only do chopsticks. You can train me forever to play tennis, and I will never be able to play at Wimbledon. So the question is, and we've looked at it, about 1% of the population can exhibit this phenomena under laboratory conditions. And that sounds like a small amount, but my gosh, if you multiply that by the people on the Earth, there are a lot of people who can do this. But not everybody can, because not everybody can run a 4-minute mile. Not everybody can jump 6 feet in the high jump. So it's not a surprise that it's winnowed down. We have some idea. Have you heard of the concept called synesthesia. Have you heard of that
Yes, it's where you confuse senses. You taste sight, or colors, or you smell what you touch, right?
We think our best people are what are called synesthetes, that have that ability in their heads, and you can look at the functional MRI pictures of their brain, and they're getting crosstalk among the various sensory parts of the brain.
Okay, so when I was a teenager, I took LSD, and I experienced that. I experienced synesthesia. Is this, it's just kind of your senses getting scrambled. Is this something that could be induced with a substance like LSD?
There is a guy in the UK that's been examining that for a very long time. I joined you back in the 60s on a similar situation. But it turns out that those, and shamans throughout history have said, well, peyote and other magic mushrooms and so on, what that does is create a marvelous internal experience in your brain. I mean, it's really lovely sometimes and terrifying at others, but that's in your brain. It actually gets in the way of information coming from some external source via ESP to get into your brain. It becomes a discrimination problem. Somebody whispering to you in a crowded restaurant, you can't understand what they're talking about. Too much noise.
Right. Oh, that makes perfect sense. And because Tim Leary back in the day speculated about this, that LSD might be the thing that proved psychic abilities. But you think that it actually interferes with the process?
Actually, there's more than just think about it. A guy named David Luke at Greenwich College in England has done extensive work in various countries around the world. They can't do it here because the substances are controlled, and he found that it gets in the way.
It gets in the way. Fascinating stuff. Thanks so much for dropping by and talking with us, Dr. May. Dr. Edwin C. May, the founder and director of the Laboratories for Fundamental Research, LFR.org. It's been fascinating. Thanks so much for dropping by.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Tom. Thank you very much.
Mine too. We will be back in just a moment. Stick around. We're going to get back into economics and politics.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. X-Chair, changing the world one seat at a time. More information at xchairtom.com. Bloomsy Box, simply better blooms. More info available at bloomsybox.com, code TOM. And Boll & Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bollandbranch.com, code TOM.
Today and tomorrow are your last chances to get that really good feeling knowing that you have become part of the solution instead of the problem, or instead of just standing on the sidelines. Last chance to pitch in to help Free Speech TV. We are behind. We need your help. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. If you value this network, if you value the programming on this network, my show and all the others, call now. Call now and let them know that you're listening. Let them know that you're watching. Let them know that you care about Free Speech TV. You want to support Free Speech TV. You want to keep this network going. And most important, make a monthly sustaining contribution. These are the most important contributions you can make to Free Speech TV because they provide them with the ability to budget. They know what's coming in. And right now they represent just a little tiny slice of their pledge drive income. And I want to get that up to the point where instead of the one-time gifts being their principal source, it's, they've got this foundation, and then the one-time gifts become like the icing on the cake sort of thing, And so, yes, please, by all means, give a one-time gift and get one of the premiums that they have, but then also tell them, yeah, I want that book, I want that book on oligarchy. That's going to be a really good book. And so, I'll give you $120 right now, but by the way, would you take $10 a month off my credit card, until I tell you to stop, or for the next year or whatever? That way, and that makes you a sustaining member. You get the really cool refrigerator magnet calendar. It's a calendar for your refrigerator that's held on magnetic. You get that. But it also means that you're helping Free Speech TV with their budgeting and with their planning going forward. You're basically becoming a day-to-day part of Free Speech TV rather than just an occasional supporter. It's really important. It's really, really useful and helpful and important. There are a whole bunch of premiums for those one-time gifts that I was just talking about. With a $20 gift, you get the Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the Free Speech TV Fight for Democracy sticker. With a $50 gift, there is the Change Never Happens from the Top Down tote bag, really nice, good, well-made canvas tote bag, or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, you have your choice of the Free Speech TV black hat or the Thom Hartmann Program mug. This is something that no other program can offer you. So the Thom Hartmann Program mug, I think it's a really cool thing. That's with $75. With a $100 gift, you have your choice of 2 Free Speech TV face masks or the 2010 quarantine Free Speech TV tumbler. Kind of I survived 2020, excuse me, if I said 2010 before, you know what I meant. With a $120 gift, too many 20s and 1s here. With a $120 gift, there's the Ask Me About Free Speech TV t-shirt or the social distancing kit, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the Free Speech TV hand sanitizer, or my book, The Hidden History of Monopolies, which talks about the $5,000 tax that we all pay every year because our economy over the last 40 years, since Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Act back in 1982, our economy has come to be dominated by giant corporations that are just squeezing us dry. And where is all that money going? It's popping into the pockets of the billionaires who are, the ones who own those corporations. So that's The Hidden History of Monopolies, or the new book. And I've been saying it's going to come out in the spring. I just had that in my head, but Louise was telling me yesterday, this book is going to actually be out in late January, early February. So you may get it sooner than I thought. And it's The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, and it's tracing the rise of the hard right in the United States and the history of the United States. We actually have an oligarchic history, and it's fascinating and a little chilling. And so, be well armed for those debates and arguments and know what's going on. So those are all $120 gifts. With a $240 gift, you can join us for a Free Speech TV meet and greet online. We do a Zoom call, get a dozen people together and just hang out for an hour and talk about whatever's on your mind. And I'll answer any questions I can. And sometimes I ask questions, and we'll have a good time. You can come in you can have a camera on or you can have your camera off. It's fine. Some people just don't want to show their faces. That's good. Or you can get both the Oligarchy and the Monopoly book, the Thom Hartmann Democracy book set. That's with a $240 gift. With a $360 gift, there's The Hidden History of Oligarchy, The Hidden History of Monopolies, a set of 2 face masks, and the Quarantine 2020 tumbler, making the $360 gift a real deal. And with a $1,000 gift, get in line. You can come to Portland and hang out with us when all this craziness of COVID is over. So a lot of options there, a lot of different possible choices. But the bottom line is, you know, I've been talking a lot about, I want to hit our goal by the end of the week so that Andrew from San Diego's $10,000 gets kicked in. I also want to hit our goal because I want to keep this network going. I don't want them to have to lay off people or tighten their belt. I want them to grow. I want them to be stronger. And you do too, I'm sure. So please call now, 877-37.
The exact offset of the declining purchasing power of the British. And by the way, the idea of this, the economics behind it, is really quite simple. because foreigners now find that they can get more British pounds than they did before, because that's what devaluation means, everything in England looks to other people to be cheaper. Just like to the English, everything that they get from the rest of the world has now become more expensive because they have to give up more of their pounds to get the foreign currency. So the idea is it will stimulate English exports, because everybody wants to buy the now cheaper British goods, and it will stop the British from importing as much as they did, because everything costs them more since their currency is not as valuable as it once was.
So from a nation's point of view, that seems like a rational way. Now, it may not be a functional way, but at least in theory, a rational way to deal with some of the problems of international trade. I mean, we've got other countries that have very specific obstacles to trade, from VAT taxes to tariffs to standards that our exported goods can't meet. And so we have this huge balance of payments deficit. We import more than we export. Is devaluing your currency a reasonable way to deal with that trade problem and encourage factories to come back to the United States, domestic U.S. production? Is this something that we should consider or pursue, or are the side effects of it so draconian or so drastic or so destructive that it should be avoided at all costs unless you're forced into it as the British were?
Well, usually the answer to that is it's a political struggle. It turns out that the same people that are getting advantaged in some way by a devaluation are also offset by the people who are hurt by it inside your own country. So, for example, if you're an exporter, let's take your example of devaluing the British pound. If you're a British company that sells in the rest of the world, you're going to love this, because all that the government has done will make your goods, which continue to have the same price in British pounds that they always did, they will appear to be cheaper, because people outside the country will have to give up fewer of their currency to get the British pound because it was devalued. So you, as an exporter, you will do very nicely. You're going to have more business. You're going to have more customers. But now let's take a look at an importer in England. For example, a company that buys, I'll pick something, butter from Denmark, because there is a lot of that. If you're in Britain, you're going to have to give up more of your currency to get a pound of Danish butter than you did before. So consumers, for example, in England, who buy imported goods are going to face a real shock, because they're all going to go up by 10 or 20% in the face of a devaluation. So it's good news for the British exporter. It's bad news for the British importer. And then you look at the rest of society and see, are you more affected by the rising price of imports, or are you more affected by the growing demand for the country's exports? And that's going to be different. Different communities, different regions, different industries are going to be very differently affected. And that's why you will always find, if you do the work, that before any devaluation, there are major conflicts in the Parliament, in Congress, at the executive level, between the lobbyists coming from those who will be hurt by a devaluation and push against it, versus those who will be helped by a devaluation and push for it. And whether or not you get the devaluation is really simply determined by the relative strengths of the two sides.
And so it's as much a political problem as an economic one? Is that how these typically play out?
I would go further. I would say it's mostly a political problem. Devaluation is somehow always on the agenda. There are always some industries that are having a hard time that would here based in this country, and they will go to the government, for example, and say, to be stark about it, look, you either devalue, and thereby we can sell goods around the world, we'll have a big demand for them. But if you don't do it, I'm going to close the factory and move overseas because I can't make it any other way. So you have not just given me the devaluation so I can be more profitable. You have the
Thom Hartmann Program.
Yeah, I got it. We're talking with Professor Richard Wolff. We'll be right back. And welcome back. So, Professor Wolff, when I was 16, 17 years old, I was working in East Lansing, paying for my college tuition, paying for my $35 car, paying my rent, which was, as I recall, $35 a month, or maybe $40 a month for an apartment across the street from Michigan State University. And I was doing this with a job at Bob's Big Boy, washing dishes and occasionally cooking, for $2.30 an hour, as I recall. This would have been like 1966, 67, 68. Today, the minimum wage is no longer $2.30 an hour, and rent for a one-bedroom efficiency apartment across the street from MSU is no longer less than $50 a month. Is what we have had since the 60s here in the United States technically a devaluation, literally a devaluation? It seems like a step-by-step process. How is that different from what Britain did when in one day they chopped 20% off the value of the pound?
Okay, it's a classic question. Economists have worried about this for a long time. And it has basically been resolved by being careful about a definition. Devaluing a currency is very narrow. It simply means changing the value of a currency in relationship to other currencies in the world. It's not comparing the price of something before and after another date, or comparing the price of one good to another. It's comparing the value of a dollar in relationship, say, to a euro or a Japanese yen or any other currency. That's what devaluation means. When you talk about money losing its value in relationship to goods and services, like the rent you talked of, or the pay you got for working at the restaurant, etc., that we use a different word for. That's the depreciation, it's called, of the currency. So those are completely different things. One is the relationship of money to the goods you buy in your life, the goods and services. So think of it as the relationship between money and the objects you use money to purchase. That's depreciation. That is separate from the relationship between whatever money you use and the other monies that are floating around the world. That's called the devaluation when you change that.
Right. So we're talking depreciation. Is inflation a symptom of depreciation or vice versa?
No, it's exactly the flip side. That's right. A depreciating currency, another way to say that my currency is depreciating is to say that I'm going through an inflation, because an inflation means that a dollar, because you're raising prices, a dollar gets you fewer and fewer things. In that sense, the value of the dollar in relationship to objects is depreciating. It doesn't buy you as much. If I raise the price of a hamburger, I double it, well, then my dollar won't get me the hamburger it once did because the price has gone up. So the value of my dollar in relationship to objects, like a hamburger, has depreciated. That can go on without there being any necessary change in the value of the dollar in relationship, say, to the Turkish lira or to the Russian ruble or anything else.
Right. We'll continue this conversation. On this week's Science Revolution, Vien Trong with Tom Steyer's Climate Justice joins the show with a vision for a green, red, and blue climate New Deal. That vision includes Native Americans, a blue New Deal for our threatened oceans, and a green New Deal for our coastal communities. Dr. Michael Greger joins us. Have you gained a few COVID pounds? In his new How Not to Diet cookbook, Dr. Greger.
So there's a new paper out from Breakthrough, the national
sustainable weight with plant-based meals. Terry Mills, president of the National Nursing Network, drops by on why a national nurse for public health is important. Plus, Laura Packard, the founder of Healthcare Voices, explains open enrollment under the ACA to help the 16+ million uninsured Americans get themselves enrolled. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are found. Welcome back. We're talking with Professor Richard Wolff, the economist and author of The Sickness is the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. His website, democracyatwork.info, or rdwolff with 2fs.com. Professor Wolff, we were touching on something that I had confused with depreciation, which is, with devaluation, which is depreciation. That is the value of a currency going down relative to goods and services within the country. And I used the example of, I used to work for minimum wage, $2.30 an hour is my recollection back in the 60s. And I could live just fine, but I couldn't live just fine today on $2.30 an hour. And that means that our currency has gone down in value. Why do countries depreciate their currency over time? It seems to me, looking at historical tables and whatnot, that depreciation has really stepped up since the 70s and 80s, and I'm wondering why that is the case here in the United States. And what brings it about? What's the advantage, disadvantage? Why do governments do this? How does this happen?
Well, depreciation of a currency, this experience that the dollar just gets you, and to take our country as an example, but the dollar gets you fewer and fewer things, that the price of everything is going up, some more, some less. There are usually multiple explanations, but it is at least, as we saw with devaluation, it's at least as much a political outcome as it is economic. Think of it this way. Every price, pretty much, is set by whoever is selling the thing whose price we're looking at. What is the price of a hamburger? Well, it's set by the hamburger company. To say that they set it, the corporations, the businesses, the capitalists set the price, doesn't mean they can set it at anything they wanted. If they charged $400 for the hamburger, obviously we wouldn't buy it. So they are constrained. They can't do just exactly what they want. They have to worry about being able to sell the stuff. No good to make something and price it so you can't sell it, then you're out of business. So there are all these forces that shape what the seller thinks he or she can get for the object that they produce. Okay, now let's take a little look. It is clearly interesting for every capitalist to be able to charge a higher price than a lower one. That is mostly the objective. The only time a capitalist would be interested in lowering the price is if they were sure that they could sell so many more of something that, in a sense, that would offset the fact that they lowered the price. So there's a kind of built-in bias most of the time to push for higher prices. But again, you have to be worried that if you raise them too much, then you won't sell, and that will undo whatever advantage the raised price might have given you. All right, now let's enter the next phase of the story. How much you can charge also depends on the incomes people have. How much do they have to spend? If people's incomes are constrained, then you can't raise your prices because the people can barely afford to pay what you're charging now. That becomes a constraint. We haven't had much of inflation in the last decade, in large part because our economy never really recovered from the Great Recession of 2008, 9, and 10, and that really put a crimp in corporations. They could not raise prices because Americans could not afford it. Here's another factor that begins to enter the story: foreign competition. American companies would have loved to raise the prices of all manner of things, but they couldn't, in part because, to take the most important example, the Chinese economy was producing as good or better things for the same or lower price. When you have a competitor that powerful, then raising the price becomes impossible in this country because everybody will shift from you, the seller, the producer here in America, to the equivalent producer at a lower price from China. All the Chinese needed to make this work was to have someone in the United States act as the distributor. The Chinese could produce the same or better quality. They could do it at a lower price, but they didn't have the distribution mechanism here in the United States to make the competition effective, to give a lesson, if you like, to every American producer: don't you dare raise your price, because if you do,
Walmart?
The Chinese will get it. Well, you know who solved that problem for them? Walmart.
Who's that?
Walmart brought cheap Chinese goods to every corner of the United States, and that became a major shaper blocking American companies from raising their price. And here's the last one. If the government decides to flood the economy with money the way it has over the last few years, trying to cope with the economic problems we have, well, if you put a lot more money out there, that may, only word is may lead to people who get that money to start buying things. And if that happens, it would allow prices to go up, which is why a lot of people worry that the Federal Reserve's pumping of mass
You're
money
listening to the
into the
Thom Hartmann
economy.
Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Sorry, we just run right into these breaks. We'll be back in about 5 minutes with Professor Richard Wolff. We'll finish this thought and continue this conversation. Stick around. Today and tomorrow are your last chances to get that really good feeling knowing that you have become part of the solution instead of the problem, or instead of just standing on the sidelines. Last chance to pitch in to help Free Speech TV. We are behind. We need your help. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. If you value this network, if you value the programming on this network, my show and all the others, call now. Call now and let them know that you're listening. Let them know that you're watching. Let them know that you care about Free Speech TV. You want to support Free Speech TV. You want to keep this network going. And most important, make a monthly sustaining contribution. These are the most important contributions you can make to Free Speech TV because they provide them with the ability to budget. They know what's coming in. And right now they represent just a little tiny slice of their pledge drive income. And I want to get that up to the point where instead of the one-time gifts being their principal source, it's, they've got this foundation, and then the one-time gifts become like the icing on the cake sort of thing, And so, yes, please, by all means, give a one-time gift and get one of the premiums that they have. But then also tell them, yeah, I want that book, I want that book on oligarchy. That's going to be a really good book. And so, I'll give you $120 right now. But by the way, would you take $10 a month off my credit card, until I tell you to stop, or for the next year or whatever? That way, and that makes you a sustaining member. You get the really cool refrigerator magnet calendar. It's a calendar for your refrigerator that's held on magnetic. You get that. But it also means that you're helping Free Speech TV with their budgeting and with their planning going forward. You're basically becoming a day-to-day part of Free Speech TV rather than just an occasional supporter. It's really important. It's really, really useful and helpful and important. There are a whole bunch of premiums for those one-time gifts that I was just talking about. With a $20 gift, you get the Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the Free Speech TV Fight for Democracy sticker. With a $50 gift, there is the Change Never Happens from the Top Down tote bag, really nice, good, well-made canvas tote bag, or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, you have your choice of the Free Speech TV black hat or the Thom Hartmann Program mug. This is something that no other program can offer you. So the Thom Hartmann Program mug, I think it's a really cool thing. That's with $75. With a $100 gift, you have your choice of 2 Free Speech TV face masks or the 2010 quarantine Free Speech TV tumbler. You know, kind of I survived 2020, excuse me, if I said 2010 before, you know what I meant. With a $120 gift, too many 20s and 1s here. With a $120 gift, there's the Ask Me About Free Speech TV t-shirt or the social distancing kit, which is 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the Free Speech TV hand sanitizer, or my book, The Hidden History of Monopolies, which talks about the $5,000 tax that we all pay every year because our economy over the last 40 years, since Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Act back in 1982, our economy has come to be dominated by giant corporations that are just squeezing us dry. And where is all that money going? It's popping into the pockets of the billionaires who are, the ones who own those corporations. So that's The Hidden History of Monopolies, or the new book. And I've been saying it's going to come out in the spring. I just had that in my head, but Louise was telling me yesterday, this book is going to actually be out in late January, early February. So you may get it sooner than I thought. And it's The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, and it's tracing the rise of the hard right in the United States and the history of the United States. We actually have an oligarchic history, and it's fascinating and a little chilling. And so, be well armed for those debates and arguments and know what's going on. So those are all $120 gifts. With a $240 gift, you can join us for a Free Speech TV meet and greet online. We do a Zoom call, get a dozen people together and just hang out for an hour and talk about whatever's on your mind. And I'll answer any questions I can. And sometimes I ask questions, and we'll have a good time. You can come in you can have a camera on or you can have your camera off. It's fine. Some people just don't want to show their faces. That's good. Or you can get both the Oligarchy and the Monopoly book, the Thom Hartmann Democracy book set. That's with a $240 gift. With a $360 gift, there's The Hidden History of Oligarchy, The Hidden History of Monopolies, a set of 2 face masks, and the Quarantine 2020 tumbler, making the $360 gift a real deal. And with a $1,000 gift, get in line. You can come to Portland and hang out with us when all this craziness of COVID is over. So a lot of options there, a lot of different possible choices. But the bottom line is, I've been talking a lot about, I want to hit our goal by the end of the week so that Andrew from San Diego's $10,000 gets kicked in. I also want to hit our goal because I want to keep this network going. I don't want them to have to lay off people or tighten their belt. I want them to grow. I want them to be stronger. And you do too, I'm sure. So please call now, 877-37. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at ThomHartmann.com. Hey, we have a special new video up for supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com, and it's about how FDR in 1944, in fact, January 44, in his State of the Union address, talked about how important it was to add rights to the Bill of Rights. The original Bill of Rights was all political rights. He said it's time to enshrine economic rights in our Constitution. I would add, like most of the governments of Europe have done. And this includes the right to housing, the right to food, the right to a good job that pays well, the right to an education, including a college education, and the right to health care. It is pretty powerful stuff. And frankly, I think that what this coronavirus crisis is proving is that we are all in this together, and that Reagan's thing about government is never going to help you was just a load of crap. And so you can check it out over at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. Professor Richard Wolff is on the line with us for the hour. We're talking about economics more broadly. Professor, we touched on depreciation, and I'd like to understand the relationship between that and inflation and deflation. I don't know if it was you who told me this years ago or somebody else who suggested that the two principal reasons that inflation can happen are, number one, that a government prints more money than there is, demand for goods and services, and with more money chasing fewer goods, the price of goods goes up, which doesn't happen in the United States so much because we're the world's reserve currency. And then the second was that so then the question is what happened in the 70s, with the big inflation that we had. And the answer that I heard was if a core commodity to an economy, the price of that goes up because of external factors, that will ripple through the economy and produce inflation. In this case, it was 2 consecutive oil embargoes by the Arabs in the late 60s and early 70s. First of all, fact check all that and my understanding of that. But then, secondly, Margaret Thatcher in this movie, The Crown, argued that one of the reasons that inflation was happening in the United Kingdom, and again, this was the late 70s, and I know Reagan echoed this in the first couple of years of the 80s, was not because the price of oil had gone up and not because the Fed had produced more dollars, but because the federal government was spending too much money and we have to go into austerity to stop inflation. And Jerry Ford, in fact, was promoting this with his whip inflation now buttons. Remember that, the win buttons? So what's the real story here with all this stuff? Whoa. Oh, I did it again. Professor Wolff, I'm sorry. I forgot to put you back on the air.
Okay.
You're back on the air.
All right. It's important to keep separate what's going on, what the issue is, and then the political spin that is always encumbering it. So if you're a libertarian, if you're all of those other things, you tend to want to make the government the bad guy. The government is doing the wrong thing. It shouldn't be messing around. It should keep itself away. It's just, the endless recycling of laissez-faire. It goes back to Adam Smith, et cetera, et cetera. For those people, since inflation is a scary phenomena, prices going up, there are examples of extreme inflation, Germany in the 1920s, and so on. Then the story is told it's because the government is doing something bad, either pumping money into the economy or running deficits. The logic there is very weird. Let me explain. An inflation is an imbalance. It means that either there's more money running after too few goods, and think of it in a very simple way. It's you and I have our kids with us, and we're in the park, and they want ice cream. And we go to the ice cream vendor, and it turns out that we've got 5 kids, but there's only 2 ice cream cones left. Question, how are you going to allocate? And before we can work out a system, how do we divide 2 ice creams among 5 children, you and I start bidding against each other. I say to the guy, well, I'll offer you $1 more per ice cream cone if you give the 2 to me. No, says my friend, I'll offer you $2 more. And though the price gets bid up because of the imbalance between the demand and the supply, more people have money with which to buy something, then there is something to be bought. But that's all that makes an inflation happen. And of course, then the question becomes, it can either be that there's more money and the goods aren't there, or that there's lower quantity of goods, or a third possibility, that there isn't an imbalance, but that the people who sell are greedy. They want to jack up the price. They don't care if all kinds of people can't afford it. They're going to make enough money by jacking up the price to make it worthwhile for them to do so. And when inflations happen, you usually have all of those things going on. But the folks, for example, the business community that raises prices because they want more profits, surely do not want the public to know that. They want to blame somebody else. And a whipping boy in our culture, economically, is the government. That's how we have trained our people. If there's something going on that isn't good, always blame the government, never blame the capitalist or the economic system. That's been the mantra in our society for a very, very long time. But it doesn't pass muster as logic. If corporations, for whatever reason, feel that they either must or they can raise the price, they do so. And one of the chief reasons is to make more money. But to explain to the population that the prices are going up, the things making it unaffordable for you to buy them, is happening because capitalists are greedy for more profits, that's not an allowable argument, even though it is logically absolutely impeccable. So the truth of it is, there are many things in an economy that create imbalances all the time between the demand for this and the supply of whatever the demand is for. And in that moment, whenever the demand exceeds the supply for whatever reason, you have a situation in which the seller is tempted to raise the prices, and then you get the inflation.
So I think you and I are both old enough to remember when gasoline was 25 cents a gallon.
Absolutely.
And there were always 4 gas stations on a corner competing, 24 cents, no, 23 cents. Why is gasoline no longer 25 cents a gallon? What has happened over this period of time? And was it the Arab oil embargo that really produced that wild inflation period that we had that many people argue crippled the Jimmy Carter presidency?
Well, I think it was mostly a political outcome. You had a very few countries, big oil companies, the ones we still know, Standard Oil and all of the others, dominating a market, being able through political power to bring oil up, particularly in the Middle East, but not only there, at a very low price and sell it at a much higher price, making big profits. But over time, the very poverty of the Middle East, the very poverty in places like Venezuela and all the other places that have oil, produced a demand that had to be met politically. You cannot, it's the end of colonialism, basically. You cannot keep taking the oil out of these poor countries where masses of people are desperately poverty-stricken without a demand arising, hey, this is oil under our land. Why are we not benefiting? At that point, all of these governments, particularly in the Middle East, but again, not only there, began to go through a series of revolutions and political upheaval. Long story short, governments emerged there which said to the oil companies, hey, you can't keep taking everything away from us and giving us next to nothing. You're going to have to give us not just money to a few families to make them very rich. That had been going on all along. No, you're going to have to give us a much larger payoff for getting access to our oil and our gas. And you have to, and you know you have to, because the cheap oil has made your economy develop a dependence on that oil because it was so cheap. You can't now suddenly cut us off. We kind of have you because you have developed your capitalist economies based on cheap energy. And so a deal was done. Okay, we at Standard Oil or we at Mobil or we at Texaco or whatever it was, we will give you way more money, and then what we're going to have to do to stay rich and profitable, here we go now, is to jack up the price of the oil that we charge to heat the homes in North America and Western Europe, to fuel the vehicles, and all the rest. So
and that helped produce the inflation?
Anti-colonialism, you get the inflation of energy prices.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I thought that's where you were going with that, and you know, which always, whenever inflation comes up on this and forgive my jumping in, but I saw that at the break we were about to hit the break. Whenever this comes up, people always say, "Well, what about the gold standard?" Or you know, it's the evil Fed, or things like that. Let's talk about that too. This subject, I think, has a lot more depth than I'd initially thought. Stick around. We're talking with Professor Richard Wolff.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit THOMHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
His latest book is The Sickness is the System. When capitalism fails to save us from pandemics or from itself. And welcome back. So, Professor Wolff, we have about 4 minutes before we hit another break. Can you speak to the role of the Fed and also the gold standard? I get people calling in going, you know, FDR messed with the gold standard, and then Nixon closed the gold window in 71 or 72, and therefore all these terrible things have happened. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, again, I think it's mostly an ideological and political spin game. Who are you going to blame? The inflations are terrifying. When they get going, they're often very difficult to slow down. Prices keep going up. And, you know, when prices go up, people who are on fixed incomes, they are really screwed in this process because they can't increase their incomes to afford to pay the rising prices. So, for example, pensioners, people who are on a fixed payment because they finished a lifetime of work and they're relying on their Social Security or their pension or whatever. These things never rise as fast as inflation. Some of them never rise at all. And so the inflation literally eats up the standard of living. You can see with the minimum wage. We haven't raised the minimum wage in a long time. Prices keep going up. And that means that what you can buy if you live on the minimum wage, as millions do, keeps shrinking. And so there are real victims of inflation. And so something has to be done lest those people say the obvious, which is, why do we live in an economic system that behaves like this? If nobody wants there to be an inflation, why do we have one? Well, the answer is it's not true that nobody wants it. There are people who get advantages by raising prices. And if you permit that, if you allow that, well, then you're going to allow inflation. For example, for every argument you hear that the government pumped money into the economy and therefore we have an inflation, I can show you the exact same story run the other way, that what happened was companies raised prices. Now, what this meant was few people could afford to buy the stuff. Therefore, the stuff wasn't being purchased. Therefore, they were losing jobs. Why produce things that people can't afford to buy? So the government got frightened that this would mean a recession, so they threw in money to the system so that there would be enough money to pay for the things at a higher price. In other words, what the Fed does enables the private sector to cause an inflation. It isn't the cause, it's the result, if you like, of how the private sector works. You know, in the Middle Ages, when these kinds of things first began, the Roman Catholic Church, the Universal Church in Europe at the time, said the following: the price of everything should be what the church called a just price. In other words, biblical justice should be used to determine what is a reasonable price. It's the opposite of the notion in capitalism that a seller should charge, quote, whatever the market will bear. This kind of idea that you should be out there getting the best price you possibly can is what fuels many of the inflations that we have seen in the world, but you can't say that because it becomes a criticism of the system.
Remarkable. We'll be right back. Coming up on 10 minutes before the hour, Professor Richard Wolff with us. His latest book, The Sickness is the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics in Itself. rdwolff.com, democracyatwork.info. You can help America return to democracy by telling friends and family how to listen to this and other great progressive programs. Tag You're It. So back in 2018, Bayer, the German pharmaceutical company, bought Monsanto, the American chemical and pesticide company, and, you know, God only knows what else, you know, seeds and whatnot. Anyhow, Bayer bought them for $63 billion. Bayer just very recently set aside $10 billion to cover the cost of consumers, people in their homes, who bought Roundup and got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancer, from Roundup, this product that Monsanto makes that Bayer now is responsible for. $10 billion. The kicker is that the home use of Roundup only represents about 10% of Monsanto's sales of this product, glyphosate. It's amazing. There's a whole video about this for the people who support our program over at ThomHartmann.com. You can check it out over there. Professor Wolff is here with us. Professor Wolff, how does all of the two quick questions, because we just have about 4 minutes until the end of the hour here. Number one, how does the gold standard fit into all of this, or even should it, this conversation? And number two, when Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan both said that the way to stop inflation was to basically gut the social safety net, to reduce payments to people on pensions or the needy or the hungry, you know, was that just pure political BS, or is there something to that?
That's political BS. Pure, I don't know what pure BS is, but whatever you mean by that, yes. Listen, Margaret Thatcher and people like her were against the social safety net when prices were going nowhere, when prices were going down, and when prices were going up. Blaming or justifying their hostility to government support for the victims of capitalism, blaming that on inflation, I mean, it's just silly. It has nothing. The one has nothing to do with the other. You can take care of people if you want to. It doesn't require an inflation. It doesn't cause an inflation. These two things have nothing to do with each other. What you see here are people with a political agenda grabbing on to whatever is the hot news of the moment, hoping to generate in people a notion, gee, if you're concerned about the hot item in the news, well, then you should line up behind whatever our political agenda happens to be. The reality is the following. You can stop an inflation any time you want. I'm going to give you the example of Richard Nixon, hardly a radical. In 1971, he gets on the television, on the radio, and he says to the American people, we're having an inflation, it's not good, and as of tomorrow morning, we're not going to have one because I'm declaring what he called a wage price freeze. And he said, anybody who raises a price as of tomorrow morning, you will be arrested and you'll be thrown in jail because it's a crime. And guess what? Prices stopped going up. There is nothing mystical, nothing fatalistic about an inflation. If you're serious and you don't want one, it's easy to stop because you can say to every seller of anything, you are frozen where you are. That's why it's called a freeze. You can't raise the price anymore. And now we're going to solve our economic problems, producing and distributing goods and services in a rational way that meets our needs. And we're not going to be held hostage by what particular sellers do when they fool around with prices. It's also a recognition, if I could conclude, that letting individuals make a decision like raising a price can only be done if you pretend that these are not social decisions. But of course they are. Letting people raise a price affects everybody who depends directly or indirectly on that good whose price is being raised. Once you see the political and social consequences of setting prices, then the question arises, why do we allow that to be done by individuals seeking their own profit rather than in a democratic way where the prices of things are shaped according to what we think the community as a whole needs.
Thus, things like the minimum wage. So what about the gold standard? We have about a minute and a half.
Well, you know, people have always wanted there to be some. They kind of understand. People always have that a corrupt society can play with the money of everything, play with the price of everything. It always has. So they wanted to take it away from being this tool that an evil king or a corrupt government could use, or corrupt businesses. And so they wanted something objective. And so gold seemed to be, okay, something that, yes, it's mined out of the ground, but there it sits hard and fast and everlasting. Let's link the money to that. By the way, you know what's being promoted these days as the substitute for gold? Bitcoin. Cryptocurrencies. Again, because you can imagine maybe with blockchain technology you can do something that will make it less of a tool for people to use to enrich themselves at the society's expense. There is no shortcut. If you want the system to work for the people as a whole, you've got to democratize it, because no gimmick will do that for you.
In other words, the gold standard isn't going to save us. Never did.
Absolutely. Never did. It doesn't now. That's right.
And blockchain won't either. Fascinating stuff. Dr. Wolff, thank you so much for the deep dive today. I really appreciate it. It's great talking with you.
Thank you very much, Tom. The same here.
Thank you. And be sure to check out Professor Wolff's newest book, The Sickness is the System. And you can check out his websites, democracyatwork.info and rdwolff.com. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. So get out there, get active, tag. You're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you. And tomorrow's Anything Goes Friday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit THOMHartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code THOM. The Clean Phone Pro phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. X-Chair, changing the world one seat at a time. More information at xchairtom.com. Bloomsy Box, simply better blooms. More info available at bloomsybox.com, code TOM. And Boll & Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bollandbranch.com, code TOM.